Aizawa cried and looked very distressed when a baseball fell right next to him. Someone commented that it was 80 points for Akun, while another mocked him, asking why he couldn't control himself and how he dared to call himself a member of the baseball club. The group continued calling Aizawa over, demanding that he act happier. Otherwise, he would make them look like bullies. They urged him to smile, and despite his tears, Aizawa tried his best to comply. The footage reveals that his face was the target for the 100-point score, as someone else shouted that he had reached 100 points and suggested another round. The story concludes with a time period set in late May 2021. We see a woman asking someone else if she is Megumi, and remarking that it has been a long time since they last met. The woman said that Megumi hadn't changed at all, but Megumi denied it, replying that she had gotten old, even though she was now 35 years old. They shift their attention to another girl and mention that she is Satake-san. This surprises the other woman, who asks again, unable to believe that this could be the same plain girl from the past. As the scene continues, viewers see many boys attracted to Satake-san. One woman remarked that she now had far more admirers than before. Another woman, suspicious, said she must have had plastic surgery. Suddenly, a man turned around, and he realized it was Suzuki. He asked Suzuki why he was late and if he was trying to act cool. But Suzuki denies this, saying it's not the case. Suzuki then approached the women, saying it had been a long time since they last met. They replied that it had indeed been a long time, expressed their delight at his arrival, and confessed that they had thought he wouldn't attend. Suzuki explained that he would definitely come because he was the organizer of the event. One of the women responded saying that she had decided to help and coordinate the reunion, but she'd worried about whether it would be possible to bring everyone together after 20 years. Suzuki agreed and remarked that it seemed like a lot of people from grades 3 to 2 had come. He added that even before the class started, Class 3-2 had always been a class with strong friendships. Then our protagonist walked in. Megumi remarked that Suzuki was still as cool as ever. The other woman said that Suzuki now seemed like an outstanding employee working at the bank. And according to rumors, his annual salary exceeds 100,000. Hearing this, Megumi was extremely surprised, saying that her husband was just a civil servant with a salary of only half that amount. She even expressed envy towards Suzuki's wife. One of the women remarked that the people who appeared here must be living good lives, because those with miserable lives would never dare come to a place like this. At this point, someone announced that it was time to begin and told Suzuki to start the program. Suzuki stepped onto the stage with a microphone, introducing himself as the organizer of today's event. He began by expressing his gratitude to everyone present, emphasizing that they had managed to gather such a large number, despite only giving about a month's notice. He also joked that it was fortunate that many people weren't busy. Hearing this, everyone laughed, and one person humorously replied that they weren't unemployed. Suzuki went on to say it was nostalgic to see familiar faces again. Meanwhile, someone was surprised to see Aizawa walk in. He slowly walked towards the crowd, and everyone was astonished and surprised. Nevertheless, Suzuki's voice continued to ring out, saying that 20 years had passed, and he hoped everyone would have a really good evening, just like the days they had spent as students. Suzuki suddenly stopped speaking when he heard someone in the crowd exclaim, "Is that really true?" He looked at the name tag and realized Aizawa was standing in the middle of everyone. Aizawa just stood there motionless. Aizawa faced the curious and puzzled stares of those around him, while they started asking why he had come here. Suzuki looked at Aizawa, and Suzuki was pulled back to old memories when he used to bully him. However, he quickly resumed his speech, encouraging everyone as if nothing had happened. Even so, the atmosphere in the room became somber as people only responded awkwardly to his enthusiasm. Amidst the crowd, a few people whispered to each other, wondering if that was Aizawa from Class 3-2, the one who had been bullied to the point of dropping out of school. They wondered how someone like him could possibly attend this class reunion, and some questioned who had invited him. Some suggested that Aizawa must have a very strong spirit. Shortly after, Takano approached Aizawa and called his name, asking if he still remembered her. Aizawa confirmed that he still remembers. Takano began to express her remorse, saying that she always felt regret for what she had done in the past. She said that she had wanted to apologize for a long time, but ultimately couldn't help him at the time. Takano sincerely apologized for everything. Hearing these words, Aizawa felt confused as old memories flooded back. He recalled how Takano had mocked him, calling him pathetic and laughing when he cried. Currently, Takano says she is married, has children, and is living very happily. She asked Aizawa if he still resented her for what had happened in the past. Aizawa interrupted her, assuring her that he no longer held any resentment, and smiled at her. Seeing this, she asked again in surprise to be sure. Meanwhile, several others began approaching Aizawa to apologize. Meanwhile, a few others stood at a distance, wondering whether they should do the same. One person said that they hadn't actually done anything bad to Aizawa and had never even intended to bully him. However, Suzuki unexpectedly asked who they were talking about. This caused the others to panic and awkwardly deny everything, insisting that they had done nothing wrong. Then Suzuki approached Aizawa. Suzuki looked at Aizawa and said it had been a long time. They also expressed their joy at finally being able to see each other again. The entire room fell into a tense and awkward atmosphere as all eyes turned toward the two of them. Suzuki asked Aizawa if he had stopped attending school in the middle of his 3rd year. He added that everyone felt very lonely at that time and wished they could attend the graduation ceremony with Aizawa. As he spoke, Suzuki extended his hand, as if to shake Aizawa's hand. Meanwhile, a man standing nearby wondered what Suzuki was saying, as memories of past events flooded his mind. Suzuki suggested everyone play a game where they would bully Aizawa, and he said that things had been a bit slow lately, so they should kill time together until graduation. Another person asked Suzuki if something was wrong, and Aizawa replied that he was glad Suzuki hadn't changed, and Aizawa always wanted to see him again. They shook hands. At this point, someone holding a camera announced that they would be taking a commemorative photo and asked everyone to stand together. People started posing for photos. Then Suzuki pulled Aizawa aside, and Suzuki asked him why he had come there. Suzuki said that the party was ruined by his presence. He said that they should reminisce about good times together and asked Aizawa to feel the atmosphere. Aizawa said nothing. And Suzuki continued. Suzuki said that this was the reason Aizawa became annoyed with him. Whether they shoved his head down the toilet, threw balls at his face, or forced him to eat garbage, Aizawa never resisted. Suzuki told Aizawa he should be a little more cheerful. At that moment, the photographer asked Aizawa and Suzuki to stand together for a photo. Suzuki and Aizawa stood next to each other, and Aizawa asked him if the bullying would have stopped if he had fought back. Suzuki replied that perhaps so, but ultimately, the bullied person is still held accountable. Hearing these words, Aizawa felt shocked and angry. Seeing Aizawa's expression, Suzuki said that his face remained unchanged and asked him to smile. Aizawa told him not to worry because he was very good at smiling. Then he laughed and asked Suzuki if he hadn't noticed. Then we see Suzuki returning home, where his wife and daughter greeted him. His daughter asked him if he enjoyed the class reunion, and he replied that he did. The little girl asked if the people he met were old friends from 20 years ago and said it was wonderful. She went on to ask if people had changed. Suzuki responded that no, but deep down, he remembered Aizawa and wondered if he had ever actually thought about him. He noticed that the clothes Aizawa wore looked very shabby, and Suzuki chuckled to himself, thinking that this was indeed the reality. Suzuki believes that not everyone can change their lives, and losers will always be losers. The next morning, we see Suzuki telling himself that he thanks Aizawa. Because of Aizawa, he's in a good mood today. Meanwhile, at school, Shiori stared at her shoe cabinet in astonishment. When she discovered that her shoe cabinet had been ransacked and there was a letter inside asking her to die, she was very rude. We see her friend wishing her a good morning and asking if she's all right. She replied that it was nothing. Shiori and her friend went together, and suddenly she heard someone greet her. Good morning. Shiori turned around to look. and she recognized it was Aizawa. They both greeted Aizawa back, and he called Shiori. He asked her if she had some time. The question surprised and confused her. At this moment in the AV room, Shiori asked Aizawa what he wanted to talk about, and he asked her if anyone had harassed her recently. She was startled and asked why he asked that. Aizawa went on to ask her if anything strange had happened around her lately, and if she remembered losing her history book last week. He asked if someone had taken it. Shiori smiled, saying that he was overthinking things and that no one was bothering her. She just accidentally lost her book, and she gets along very well with everyone in the class. Aizawa said it was okay if he was overthinking things, but he also warned that even a little harassment could escalate if she let it go. He took off his sleeve, revealing his hand, and said that he had been through it. When Shiori saw Aizawa's hand, she was horrified to see the numerous scars and burns from cigarettes. She screamed in horror and asked him what had happened to his arm. Aizawa told Shiori that someone had done something similar when he was in middle school. This silenced her, and she asked him if he had been bullied. Aizawa remained silent, while Shiori said that it was terrible. And to do such a thing must be the act of those who are not human. She cried, and Aizawa agreed with her. He pondered over what Suzuki had said to him. He told Shiori that if she encountered any problems, she can talk to him right away, and he would protect her with all his might. He wondered if Suzuki could say the same words to his own daughter as he had said to Shiori. The principal told the teachers that he was sure they were all aware of the media coverage of bullying in recent days. Such information could affect at least some of their students. Therefore, teachers need to be very careful and prepared. And he was counting on their help. The principal went on to say that they should make this year like last year, when there were no bullying incidents. He smiled and asked everyone if anyone had anything to report. When everyone fell silent, the principal declared the morning meeting over. And I hope everyone works hard today. As Aizawa was walking, someone called out to him. That's Yazaki. She asked him how he was doing, and if he had gotten used to the school yet. He replied that he wasn't sure, as it had only been 2 months since he arrived, and there were still many things he didn't know. While they were walking together, Yazaki told Aizawa that she had been studying at the school for 3 years, but there were still some rules of the school that she disagreed with. Aizawa wondered about this, and she explained that what the principal had just said about bullying seemed like he was putting pressure on the teachers. This makes it difficult to report bullying cases. She continued to say that if there were any instances of bullying in her class, she would undoubtedly defend her students without hesitation, even if under pressure from superiors. Aizawa told Yazaki that she had great determination, and he completely agreed with her, smiling. Then we see Shiori asking who could be the culprit, and her friend replied that people online were saying the housekeeper seemed suspicious. Shiori was surprised and said that it was too cliché to be true, and asked if it was the wife next door. Perhaps we'll have to wait until the next episode. Her friend looked at Shiori in surprise, and Shiori thought she had guessed the culprit, so she asked her friend if she had figured it out yet. Suddenly, she turned around, and she saw Aizawa, who told her that the bell had already rung. Shiori apologizes. And then we see Aizawa starting the class saying they'll be continuing from yesterday on the details of genetics. While Aizawa was writing on the blackboard, Shiori was thinking about what he said yesterday about how even a little bullying can get worse if ignored. And she remembered the scars on Aizawa's hands when he said he had gone through that. She thought what Aizawa said yesterday was truly shocking, and wondered if what was happening to her was bullying. And if so, who was doing it? Aizawa noticed Shiori. But suddenly a student raised their hand. The students asked Aizawa if their personality traits were hereditary. Aizawa replied that it was an interesting question, and he replied that it could be said that about half of a person's personality is inherited. Upon hearing this, the students expressed surprise, saying that this was the first time they had heard of such a thing. A student asked Aizawa whether their family environment didn't determine their personality. Aizawa replied that parental upbringing and one's environment don't really have that much influence on a person's personality. Aizawa went on to say that there was an interesting experiment. He asked the students if they knew about identical twins. Then he explained that they were twins with the same set of genes. The experiment brought together identical twins who, for different reasons, had been raised in different families. They then tested for any differences in the twins' personalities, and if there are significant differences in personality, they may conclude that their environment and upbringing have altered their character. However, the results of the experiment showed that these twins had very similar personalities. Their attitudes, integrity, mental strength, etc. Through various tests, researchers have concluded that all these traits are hereditary. Hearing this, a girl began to think. Suddenly, a boy asked Aizawa that if half of their personality was determined by genetics, what determined the other half? Aizawa replied that the other half was determined by external factors. It's mainly their social group. He went on to explain that there was a strong connection between their personalities and the friends they had, a connection far stronger than the relationship they had with their family. However, this would differ in cases such as parental abuse or other unusual situations. Aizawa added that they should consider that normal families would have less influence. He continued walking towards Shiori. He looked at her and said, in short, they should remember that their personality is largely hereditary. This left Shiori feeling confused. Aizawa went back to get the book and said that they had strayed off topic a bit and would now return to the textbook. After school, Shiori was on her way home. Suddenly, she heard someone call her name. It was Aizawa. He asked her if she was all right, because he thought she seemed a little strange in class. Shiori replied that she was fine and that it was just because she had stayed up late last night. Aizawa told Shiori to be careful on her way home and then turned away. But then Shiori suddenly called him back. She asked him if he could stop the bullying that had been happening to him. This question surprised Aizawa. Shiori continued somewhat hesitantly, saying that she couldn't stop thinking about their conversation yesterday. Aizawa fell silent, preparing to say something, but suddenly someone called Shiori's name. That's her friend. She told Shiori to hurry up or she'll be late for her extra classes. Shiori apologized and left, saying she would meet Aizawa tomorrow. Aizawa stood in the science lab. He looked at the chemicals in the cabinet, and he thought about his past. In his memory, he recalled his classmates grabbing his hands and feet, preparing to carry out the death penalty. Aizawa screamed and begged them to stop. Then he heard Suzuki say that he wondered how much it would hurt if sulfuric acid got on Aizawa's face. After that, Suzuki poured sulfuric acid on Aizawa's face. Aizawa writhed in pain and screamed for help. But suddenly he felt strange because nothing was happening to him. Everyone started laughing at him, and Suzuki asked if he was stupid for causing him so much pain even from just water. Suzuki told Aizawa that sulfuric acid wasn't easy to obtain, then kicked him hard in the stomach. A group of girls walked into the classroom, but they quickly asked if anything was going on and said they would be back later. This made Suzuki smile. Aizawa cried, while Suzuki asked him if he thought the girls would help. And Suzuki said that nobody needed someone like Aizawa. Suzuki went on to ask why he was still alive in the present. Aizawa looked out the window and answered the question Shiori had asked him earlier, saying that it was precisely because he couldn't stop being bullied that he was still here. Shiori returned home. And her mother asked why she was so late. Shiori replied that she wasn't going anywhere. And after the extra lesson, she asked the teacher some questions about math. Her mother said that it was okay if that were the case and reminded her to stay disciplined, as this was an important time. Her mother went on to recount how, when she was taking her high school entrance exams, her grades suddenly stopped improving. And while everyone else got into private schools, she only managed to get into a public one. Hearing this, Shiori fell silent and felt worried. Her mother continued, saying that over the past 3 years, she'd been somewhat disappointed in herself. Shiori has stopped drinking. She slammed the glass down on the table, and she smiled and told her mother that this time she would definitely get into her dream university. Suddenly, Shiori realized something. Suzuki welcomed Shiori home. Suzuki complimented her on working so late and asked if she was hungry. Shiori replied that she was very hungry. After dinner, Suzuki asks Shiori about the inheritance of personality traits. Shiori said that it had been mentioned in her science class, and she'd never known about it, so she was very surprised. Suzuki thought about genetics. He told Shiori that she really reminded him of himself. She felt happy. He said that they were both quite decisive and good at making friends, and we cannot leave lonely people alone. Shiori smiled and agreed, saying that she did have many things in common with him, and hearing this made her happy. Suzuki smiled and said that her teacher really said interesting things, and that he wanted to meet him someday. The next day, at school, Shiori told Yumi she's really good at applying the formula that Yumi showed her. And she admitted that she was terrible at math. Yumi replied that she could only solve problems when she became familiar with them. At the same time, the two girls watched Shiori study during her lunch break. One of them said that Shiori was studying again, while Nagumo commented that she was really serious ever since she left the club. Shiori was studying diligently when another girl asked her if she wasn't a member of the basketball club. Shiori replied that she was, but both girls had left the club. The other girl said that they couldn't really take clubs seriously anymore. Suddenly, the girl said that the 5th class was about to begin, and she wanted to go home. Hearing this, Nagumo smiled and looked at Shiori and Yumi before they left. Yumi told Shiori that they would play basketball in the next class. Shiori was very excited to hear that. Yumi was surprised by Shiori's enthusiasm and asked if she really liked basketball. Shiori replied excitedly that of course she did, as she used to be a member of the basketball club. And then she checked her handbag. However, upon closer inspection, she realized that her gym clothes were missing. She looked around and discovered her gym clothes had been thrown in the trash. While Shiori was looking at the trash can, Yumi suddenly appeared from behind and saw the scene. Shiori panicked and was about to tell Yumi about being bullied, but Yumi turned away. She said she had something to do to help the teacher, then laughed and pretended not to notice anything. Shiori stood there bewildered. Shiori wondered why Yumi hadn't asked her anything after seeing her gym clothes in the trash can. Aizawa walked into the classroom and saw Shiori holding her sportswear, looking worried. This scene reminded Aizawa of what Suzuki had once said to him. No one will help him. Aizawa approached Shiori, and he asked her what was wrong. When he thought no one would help her, he recalled Suzuki's question, "Why are you still alive?" Shiori was frightened and quickly ran away. Meanwhile, Aizawa thought that the real hell had only just begun for Shiori. Shiori is in the gym. She watched Yumi talking to a classmate. Shiori wondered why Yumi was pretending not to see her tracksuit in the trash can. Suddenly, someone called Shiori's name, and that's Yazaki. She asked Shiori what she was daydreaming about and if anything was bothering her. Shiori replied that nothing was wrong. Yazaki said, "I'm sorry," because she finally secured a permanent position, but just before becoming a senior, she had to drop out of school. Shiori apologized, thinking she didn't want to give up. Yazaki said she must have her reasons. And since it's been so long, she should enjoy today. She threw the basketball to Shiori. It made her happy. We see Shiori playing basketball, thinking she'll get to play again. After 3 months, Shiori will fully enjoy what she has left. She told herself that maybe she was overthinking things. She made a successful basket. At that moment, Yumi called out to Shiori. Shiori walked towards Yumi, smiling, but Yumi hesitated before asking her about her conversation with Aizawa. This question took Shiori by surprise. Yumi went on to say that after Shiori left the classroom, she talked to Aizawa, right? Shiori replied that she didn't actually talk to him, but he just told her to hurry up or she would be late for class. After hearing that, Yumi turned around. When Shiori asked why she asked that, Yumi just smiled and said there was no particular reason. She just wanted to play. Yumi's attitude confused Shiori. Suddenly, someone called Shiori's name. Then a girl rushed forward and pushed her to the ground. Everyone looked towards Shiori. The girl pushed Shiori down and apologized, asking if she had been hit on the head. Yazaki asked Shiori if she was okay when he saw her lying on the ground, holding her head. After taking Shiori to the infirmary, the doctor said she was fully conscious, so she would be fine. She just needed to rest to be safe. Shiori said she understood, her voice tinged with disappointment. She felt it was her fault for being distracted during the match. Yazaki said it was okay. She was glad both students were fine. She noticed that Shiori was definitely very worried about the upcoming exams. If Shiori had anything she wanted to say, she could talk to Yazaki anytime. The doctor called Yazaki and told her to go get Shiori's things, but she replied that she would ask a classmate to help. Shiori thought to herself that she'd been thinking too much to the point of exhaustion. Now is the time to rest and fall asleep. While Shiori slept, someone stood beside her. It was Aizawa. He noticed her shirt was slightly lifted, revealing her waist, and unconsciously stared at her, wondering to himself what was going on. Outside the teacher's room, Yumi saw Aizawa and called out to him. Aizawa asked her what was wrong, that school was about to end. Yumi said she was curious to know how Shiori was doing. Aizawa replied that according to the nurse, Shiori was fine and her mother had already come to pick her up. He went on to say that this was unexpected and asked if she was worried about Shiori. Hearing this, Yumi was surprised and asked him what he meant. Then she yelled, saying that Shiori was her friend and of course she had to worry about her. Then Yumi angrily left, saying she didn't understand what he was thinking. Aizawa wondered if it was really true as he walked into the teacher's room. Someone said they found Shiori's phone, and another student seemed to be the one who discovered it. Yazaki said she would call Shiori's guardian, but Aizawa noticed and said it was okay. He had some documents to give her, so he would return the phone to her when he got there. At Shiori's house, her mother apologized to Aizawa for bothering him by making him come all the way to their house. Aizawa replied that it was all right, as he was also worried about Shiori's situation. Her mother looked at the phone and said that actually, she didn't want Shiori to have a phone because they were worried it would negatively impact her studies. However, because Shiori often came home late after her extra classes, her husband insisted and said that most other parents let their children use phones, and only their families wouldn't allow it. When Aizawa heard this, he looked at their family photo and saw Suzuki smiling. This made Aizawa look at him with hatred in his eyes. Shiori's mother called Aizawa and asked if something was wrong. Aizawa replied that it was nothing, then asked Shiori's mother how she was. However, Shiori's mother unexpectedly received a phone call and had to go out, apologizing to Aizawa in the process. Shiori's mother said that she had just picked Shiori up and that she was fine now. Aizawa stood up from his chair and picked up a photo of Suzuki and Shiori, in which they both looked very happy. Seeing that scene, Aizawa said that it was unfair. Suddenly, the door opened, and Shiori walked in. Aizawa smiled at her. He asked her if she was okay getting out of bed, and Shiori replied that she was fine. And she asked him about the photo he was holding. Aizawa replied that he thought they looked very happy, and he asked her if she liked her father. Shiori smiled and said that she loved her father very much. Hearing that, Aizawa smiled. Shiori went on to say that the photo was taken when she was able to ride a bicycle alone for the first time. At first, she was very scared to ride without training wheels, but her father helped her practice from morning till night. She smiled and said that halfway through, she no longer cared about cycling, but was just trying her best to see her father smile. Listen to Shiori's story. Aizawa recalled the moment Suzuki smiled at him when he was being bullied, and he thought that he had also made her father smile in the past. He told Shiori that it was a very good story. Aizawa told Shiori that her phone was on the table. Shiori thanked Aizawa and checked her phone, saying she had 7 messages. And everyone was worried about her, which made her feel very happy. Aizawa asked her if things like that made her happy. Shiori was surprised and asked why he said that, but of course she was happy and smiled. Shiori's mother entered the room and apologized to Aizawa for making him wait. She was surprised to see Shiori there and asked what she was doing there. Shiori replied that she was fine and asked if her mother was talking to her father. Her mother replied that it was true and that he would be home soon. Shiori tells Aizawa that he should see her father because he said he wanted to meet her teacher. Her mother immediately says that Aizawa is definitely busy. Aizawa stood outside the house and smiled. Meanwhile, Suzuki, with a tired expression, he ran into the house calling out Shiori's name. Mom and Shiori welcomed Suzuki. He asked Shiori if she was okay and said that he had been worried about her. Shiori replied that her teacher had just arrived and she wished he could meet her father. Because the teacher had come to return the things she had left behind, Aizawa went home, her eyes filled with hatred. Suzuki hugged Shiori and said he was so glad she was okay, and they both laughed happily. Shiori in her room, when she looked at the message from Yumi, in which Yumi asked her if she was okay and was worried about her. Suddenly, Shiori received a direct message from a stranger. She opened the video and she was terrified when she saw the video. That's a video of her sleeping in the infirmary? The video continued, and she saw a hand appear on the screen. His hand moved closer to her chest, and his hand reached into her shirt, grabbing her breasts while she slept. Shiori saw this scene. Shiori was frightened and threw the phone away. The woman trembled with fear and disgust. I wonder what that video is and who made it. The scene shifts to Aizawa talking on the phone. On the other end of the line was Shiori's mother, who thanked him for yesterday. Aizawa replied that it was no problem and asked Shiori's mother how she was doing after what happened yesterday. Shiori's mother said that Shiori came this morning and said she wasn't feeling well. So she's thinking of letting her take a day off from school and to the hospital for a checkup. She went on to say that this was strange because Shiori looked much healthier yesterday. Aizawa replied that he was also worried and didn't know what had happened, and he's very interested in her. In the classroom now, Aizawa has finished his lecture and dismissed the students. Yumi looked at Shiori's empty seat and felt worried. Suddenly, Nagumo called Yumi. Nagumo then asked Yumi if she was close to Shiori. Yumi replied that she was. Nagumo went on to say that she was the one who had bumped into Shiori and felt responsible. She said that she had read Shiori's message but hadn't replied yet, and asked Yumi if she'd received a reply from Shiori. Yumi replied that she hadn't received a reply either. Another girl said it was annoying, and the girl said, "If you've read the message, isn't it normal to reply?" Nagumo said that Shiori must not be feeling well, but she was interrupted when the other girl chimed in, saying that at least Shiori could send an emoji. She asked Yumi if she was always with Shiori, and if Shiori had told her she wouldn't be coming. Yumi replied that she hadn't. The other girl went on to say that it was a pity because Yumi had waited for Shiori without any results. She asked Yumi if she felt relieved because Shiori was always clinging to her, even making her help with her homework during lunch breaks. Aizawa heard all of this. The other girls went on to tell Yumi that Shiori's actions sometimes really bothered her. Suddenly, Yumi smiled reluctantly and said that maybe that's true sometimes. The other girls continued to say that Shiori was indeed a clingy person. Aizawa thought about the 7 anxious messages Shiori had received and scoffed. Those are really caring friends. He smiled and walked away. In the infirmary, the doctor asked Shiori, "How are you feeling, Shiori?" She replied that after resting for a day, she felt much better. The doctor said it seemed she'd been hit quite hard and advised her to be careful for another 2 or 3 days. Shiori nodded in agreement. Shiori said she wanted to ask the doctor something, and she asked the doctor if he remembered who had visited her while she was asleep. The doctor thought for a moment and said that many people had come to visit her. This included a few girls from the class because they were all worried. Shiori asked if anyone else was coming. The doctor said that Aizawa had also visited her. We see Shiori walking down the hallway. She thought that in the end she still wouldn't be able to find out who had filmed her. But based on what the doctor said, that person must definitely be someone in her class. She stood in front of the class. She wondered if she had done anything to make anyone resent her. She recalled the video, and she began to tremble with fear, praying that the video wouldn't be leaked. Shiori opened the door and greeted the class with a smile. When everyone in the class saw her, they were all happy and asked if she was okay. Seeing everyone happy to see him, Shiori felt relieved and said that she had completely recovered. Suddenly, Yumi came over and said that she was very worried because Shiori wasn't replying to her messages. Shiori apologized and said that she felt quite tired yesterday. Yumi handed her the book and said it was what they had learned in class yesterday. Seeing this, Shiori was surprised and asked if she could borrow it. Yumi replied that she intended to borrow it later. Shiori smiled awkwardly. Everyone in the class said it was a relief to see Shiori getting better, and they were happy that she had recovered. Nagumo said she felt relieved. while another girl said it was partly Nagumo's fault for hitting Shiori. Shiori immediately stated that it wasn't Nagumo's fault. She wondered to herself, among her friends who were laughing so happily, was everything really as bad as she thought? She tried to force a smile. Now, in the science lab, Aizawa said that today they would be observing somatic cell division, and they will use onions as the subject. First, they will prepare the microscopes. We see Yumi and Shiori doing an experiment together, with Shiori holding an onion and placing it under the microscope. However, Yumi stops her and says she should use tweezers because if you're not careful, there will be air bubbles. Yumi went on to say that doing the experiment correctly was crucial because it would affect their grades in class. Shiori heard this and thought that she had to be careful not to disturb Yumi. Suddenly, Shiori overheard a group of people talking, saying that the video was crazy. She turned around and overheard them discussing whether the person in the video would regain consciousness after such an incident. Hearing these words, Shiori thought they were talking about the video of her sleeping, which frightened her. Yumi saw Shiori and asked if she was all right. Shiori remained standing there, listening to them talk about what the people in the video were doing, and she felt confused. Nagumo handed the phone to Yumi and told her to watch the video. Shiori was terrified. She hastily dropped her phone and shouted for them to stop. The phone fell to the ground, and immediately everyone looked at her. And they asked if that was the same Shiori from earlier. Shiori gasped for breath, trying to calm herself down. But Himekawa rushed over, grabbed her, and asked her what was going on, pointing to the phone and saying it was hers. Suddenly, someone else spoke up, saying it was okay, when Nagumo showed the phone and said the screen wasn't broken. Himekawa angrily stated that it wasn't about that. Shiori looked at the screen and realized it wasn't her video, but a random post. Aizawa snatched the phone from their hands and told them to stop, reminding them that they were in class. Shiori tried to explain that it was just a misunderstanding, but Aizawa interrupted her and said that her behavior was also quite rude. He went on to emphasize that she shouldn't be looking at her phone during class. He warned Himekawa that he would confiscate her phone until school was over. Shiori was shocked to hear this and protested that it didn't need to be so strict. But Aizawa replied that it was the rule and reminded them that they were preparing for an exam. He emphasized that all four of them needed to take things more seriously. Hearing Aizawa mention 4 people made Yumi feel confused. Yumi tried to object, but he stopped her. Aizawa then asked Shiori to accompany him for a private conversation. They both left the classroom. Meanwhile, Himekawa was furious and said that this was the worst thing that could happen. Out in the hallway, Aizawa asked Shiori what was going on, saying that she wasn't the type to easily do such things. Shiori was silent for a moment, but eventually she confessed that she couldn't take it anymore. She started to cry, and she said she wanted to tell him everything that had happened to her, and asked if he was willing to listen to her. Aizawa patted Shiori's head gently and smiled, saying that he had told her before he would always stand by her side. Aizawa told her to go to the study room to get ready after lunch and that he would wait for her. She agreed and thanked him, then went into the classroom. During the lunch break, everyone is having lunch. Some girls said that what Shiori had done before was really impressive. Another said that she dared to do that to Himekawa. He's a really scary person when he's angry. Shiori recognized Yumi and went to apologize for what had happened earlier. Because of her, Yumi had also been dragged into this mess. Yumi simply said, "Yeah," and continued on. She tried to give Yumi the bread, saying it was her favorite kind and that she hadn't had a chance to apologize to her before. Suddenly, she stopped when she heard someone call Yumi's name. It was Nagumo and Himekawa. They invited Yumi to have a meal with them. Yumi was surprised. Yumi tried to say she couldn't, but Shiori said she wouldn't mind if Yumi came with them. Nagumo pulled Shiori aside and asked what she was saying, then told her she could come with them too. Shiori asked in surprise, "Can I go?" Nagumo replied, "Yes, Himekawa won't be angry." At the dining table, everyone eats together. Shiori tried to apologize to Himekawa for what happened earlier, but she turned away and asked Nagumo if he wanted to go karaoke after school, and Nagumo agreed. Nagumo asked Yumi if she was going, and Yumi replied that she couldn't today because she had work for the organizing committee. Shiori was about to say that she also had work to do, but Himekawa interrupted and asked her if anyone had invited her. This surprised Shiori. She tried to deny it and apologize for speaking up first, but Himekawa just laughed and told her to be more careful next time. Yumi seemed scared and confused, but Nagumo, to change the atmosphere, asked Yumi if she had seen the message. Yumi looked confused. So, Nagumo explained that it was a message from the group chat they had created yesterday. Hearing that, Shiori thought they had formed a group without her, and Yumi was in there too. She looked at Yumi, and Yumi looked back at her. But unexpectedly, Yumi turned away, refusing to look at Shiori anymore. Shiori was shocked, and she said she had to go somewhere and hurried away. Shiori is walking down the hallway, and she met Monica. She thanked him because he picked up her phone and said she was listening from Yazaki. Hearing this, Monica said that it was her phone and it had fallen under the bench in the yard. Shiori was surprised and said that was where she'd taken a nap during her lunch break, to which Monica replied that she was as clumsy as ever. He said it had been a long time since they'd spoken, and they haven't been in the same class since their first year. She asked him what grade he was in now, and he replied that he was in grade 2. She said she was in grade 5. Monica asked what kind of person her homeroom teacher was, and Shiori replied that Aizawa was a very good teacher. And just yesterday, the teacher came to her house to return her phone. She asked him why he asked, and he said that after school that day, he happened to see Aizawa and the teacher playing with her phone. Hearing that, Shiori was very surprised. He went on to say that the phone had a rather distinctive case, and he could recognize it as the phone he had picked up. She asked him again, playing with the phone? He replied that he didn't know what the teacher did with it. This made her think, what is Aizawa planning to do? She thought back and remembered that every time she was bullied, Aizawa always happened to be nearby. And when she asked the doctor if anyone had visited her while she was sleeping, then he came to visit her. Suddenly, someone called her. That's Aizawa, asking if she's finished eating. If they're finished, they should go to the dressing room. He looked at her, making Shiori panic. She apologized but suggested they talk another time and waved goodbye to him. Aizawa took her hand, and he asked why it was so sudden. Is there a reason? At this point, someone told him to stop. That was Manaka. He told Aizawa that this was sexual harassment. Aizawa let go of Shiori's hand, and he told her to go to the dressing room while he still smiled. He reminded her that she had said she would talk to him earlier. And they still had time. Shiori suddenly apologized to him. She said he was a little unreliable. Hearing that, Aizawa was very shocked. She apologized and ran away. Aizawa asked Monica who he was, and Monica replied that he was Monica from 2nd grade. Aizawa looked at Monica and asked if he had said anything to Shiori. Seeing Aizawa like that, Monica panicked and answered yes. Monica thought Aizawa was acting strangely. Then he recounted that yesterday after school, he saw Aizawa playing with Shiori's phone. And Monica asked Aizawa why he did that. Aizawa found this annoying and showed his displeasure. Monica couldn't believe what she heard and tried to ask again. But Aizawa said that in the future, they shouldn't talk to Shiori too much, and that would be good for both of us. Then he left. This left Monica confused and wondering what had just happened. Shiori was walking outside, looking sad. Aizawa stood on the first floor watching her, thinking that he had lost her trust. But that was okay, because even so, he will always be watching over her. Now, Shiori is sitting by a fountain. She thought she didn't know what to do anymore, and she wondered who she could trust. And who will listen to her? Suddenly, she recognized Yazaki. She stood up and walked towards Yazaki to talk. But Yazaki unexpectedly received a call. Yazaki was on the phone, saying that there were no club meetings today, so she was just going home. She laughed and said that she was also thinking about hearing his voice. Seeing Yazaki talking on the phone, Shiori didn't want to disturb him and decided to leave. Yazaki noticed something. But when she checked, Shiori was gone. The person on the other end of the line asked if anything was wrong, and she replied that nothing was wrong. She just thought she saw one of her students. The other person asked her if she was okay. She replied that it was just her imagination and that when the job was done, she would no longer be a teacher, but just an ordinary woman. She laughed, and the other person laughed too. Then the other person asked if she could meet him at their usual hotel in 20 minutes, and she agreed, saying she wanted to see him quickly. Finally, it was Suzuki on the other end of the line. He said he also really wanted to see her soon, while Yazaki said she loved him. Suzuki reciprocated by saying he loved her too. At the bank, Suzuki is considering an approved loan of 12 million yen. An older man told him that if he could raise at least that much money as initial capital, with just a little more, he would be able to get the business back on track. He pleaded with Suzuki that if he could help him by approving the loan, he would certainly go ahead with his plan. However, Suzuki suddenly put the business plan down and said that, "Unfortunately, I cannot approve this loan." Hearing this, the elderly man was stunned. Suzuki went on to explain that his factory had suffered losses for 2 consecutive periods. Furthermore, considering the possibility of default and other negative factors, their bank found it difficult to accept this risk. He emphasized that they lacked confidence that his company would be able to repay the loan. Hearing this, the elderly man, in a panic, told Suzuki to stop. The old man burst into tears and begged him. Then, he suddenly stood up, grabbed Suzuki by the collar, and shouted that if the bank refused him now, he wouldn't be able to continue his business, and taking on more debt would only ruin him. Suzuki, with a cold expression, told him to let go, saying that his suit would get wrinkled. The elderly man, still in shock, let go as Suzuki instructed. Suzuki went on to explain that refusing the loan was in his best interest. He said that if the man continued trying to keep the business going, the debt would only increase, and asked if he had thought about his young child. Upon hearing this, the elderly man could only burst into tears, unable to say anything more. A colleague standing nearby noticed Suzuki's actions and became concerned. Meanwhile, Suzuki seemed to be quietly relishing the old man's despair. After the meeting, the manager praised Suzuki for handling the difficult situation for everyone. Suzuki humbly replied that he was only doing what he was used to, adding that he was accustomed to dealing with people who deliberately tried to appear pitiful. He also mentioned that he had arranged an appointment with the South Bank Food Company, which greatly pleased the manager, who praised him for his quick and efficient work. Another colleague, observing everything, shared with the person next to him that Suzuki was truly amazing. He said that while the older man began to break down and cry, Suzuki maintained a smile on his face as if completely unaffected. A colleague laughed and remarked that Suzuki was indeed someone who enjoyed tormenting others, making the colleague he was talking to feel a little gloomy and say that it made him uncomfortable. The other person went on to say that Suzuki always achieved great results and that he truly admired Suzuki. He also emphasized that their manager liked Suzuki very much and was sure he would be promoted to department head next year. That person concluded that Suzuki was a perfect example of an elite individual. Unexpectedly, Suzuki smiled a terrifying smile. And Suzuki thought that throughout his life, everything had always gone exactly as he wished. At that time, he was in a love hotel with Yazaki. Yazaki was straddling him, and Suzuki was looking at her, smiling, and thinking how easy life was. After he finished, he lit a cigarette, and he told himself that for the past 35 years, he had never known failure. Everyone was in the palm of his hand. Classmates, teachers, colleagues, even his boss. He contemptuously thought they were all just a bunch of idiots. Yazaki called him and commented that the ride was amazing and he was still drenched in sweat. Suzuki smiled in agreement, but inwardly thought that even this woman was now in his hands. He thought she had nothing but youth and was a stupid teacher, because she always believed everything he said. To him, she was just a convenient plaything. Suddenly, Yazaki smiled and told him that an important event was coming up. This confused Suzuki. She continued to laugh and said that it had been a year since their relationship had become like this. Suzuki recounted that he first met Yazaki at a ceremonial basketball game, where he was there to cheer for Shiori. Yazaki smiled. She said those memories were nostalgic, and she felt content with their current relationship. She also shared that she could sense that his love for her was greater than the love he had for his wife. Suzuki put out his cigarette and noticed Yazaki had suddenly become gloomy. She seemed about to say something, but he stopped her and suddenly hugged her. He told her that she was the one he loved, which made Yazaki so happy that she cried. However, deep down, Suzuki became serious and thought it was time to end the relationship. A year had passed, and he realized she was starting to have more serious thoughts. Returning home, Suzuki thought it was a shame he wouldn't have another chance to enjoy Yazaki's body. When he entered the house, his wife greeted him with a smile and asked how he was. He asked about Shiori. His wife replied that Shiori was taking a shower. She quickly grabbed his briefcase, while Suzuki stood there, thinking about something else. He told himself that although he had never experienced failure, he had made one single mistake. He looked at his wife with hatred in his eyes, thinking to himself that she was living off him too much. Suzuki continued to think and recalled that his wife had become pregnant when she was only 19, and by the time he found out, it was too late to have an abortion. He realized that it was part of her plan, using the child as a means to mend their relationship, which was on the verge of collapse. Back then, he was extremely angry about this. Suddenly, Shiori called him, and Shiori welcomed him home. He smiled at her and replied that he had returned. Suzuki thought things were different now, and even he was surprised by how things had turned out. He looked at Shiori and realized that he loved her from the bottom of his heart. He asked Shiori about how her life at school had been lately. This question reminded her of the video, but she still replied that she had many friends and was very happy every day. Hearing that, he said that was good. As Shiori walked, she looked worried. Suzuki smiled, thinking that Shiori had just had a happy look on her face. And of course she was happy, because she had lived a wonderful life. He felt proud of himself and thought that, besides all that, she also has a young and talented father, and she must be very proud of him. Suzuki looked at the photo of the gathering and thought that he really felt bad for the children of ordinary people, because they would only drag everyone down to their level. He said it was fortunate for Shiori to be born his daughter. Meanwhile, Shiori seemed shocked upon seeing her bag. Her bag was full of trash, and all her notebooks were ruined. She wondered why, and how long would these things continue. Suddenly, one of her classmates realized this, and asked her about what had happened. Shiori was worried, and she replied that it was nothing. Her classmate advised her to talk to the teacher, but Shiori shouted that it was okay. Then she smiled and repeated that there was really nothing to worry about. Shiori left the classroom while Yumi watched her go outside. Yumi went to Nagumo's place. Yumi cautiously asked if they should invite Shiori to their group chat. Yumi went on to say that she felt Shiori might be feeling guilty about what she did with Himekawa's phone, and that if Nagumo didn't mind, inviting Shiori to join the group might be a good idea. However, before she could finish, Nagumo interrupted her. Nagumo said that she also wanted to invite Shiori to join the group, but she had seen something the other day. She said that Shiori had shown a close relationship with Manaka since the 2nd grade. Hearing this surprised Himekawa. Nagumo apologized to Himekawa and said that she knew Himekawa liked Manaka, and all the girls often talked about the two of them. Nagumo continued, saying that Shiori also knew this but acted as if she didn't know anything. Yumi tried to stop them, but unexpectedly overheard the other girls asking if Shiori had done it intentionally, even though she knew better, and they think she's really manipulative. Meanwhile, Shiori was upset to hear the girls hinting that she might be the type who chases after other people's boyfriends. She suddenly recognized someone. It was Aizawa and Yazaki. Shiori remained silent, and she walked past them. Aizawa told Yazaki that he would see her again later, and Yazaki left. However, at that moment, Yazaki heard someone yell angrily, "She's really driving me crazy." It was Himekawa, who was very angry and loudly asking what Shiori had to do with her. Nagumo tried to stop Himekawa, but unexpectedly, Himekawa became serious and intimidating. She called the friend who had spoken to Shiori earlier. Himekawa asked the girl if she was a friend of Shiori's. Hearing this question, the girl was frightened, while those around her said that she and Shiori must be very close. The girl immediately denied it, saying they weren't friends. They hardly spoke to each other, and she found Shiori rather unapproachable. Hearing the girl's words, Himikawa began to feel sorry for Shiori, but continued to mock her along with the others. Yazaki overheard this conversation and began to worry. Then, in the science preparation room, Yazaki said she couldn't be sure, but she sensed there was bullying in Aizawa's class. However, Aizawa remained silent. Yazaki continued, saying that Shiori had been acting strangely lately, and asked if she'd told him anything about it. Aizawa responded with a radiant smile, asserting that there was no bullying in his class. His answer left Yazaki feeling both anxious and frightened. Yazaki expressed his anger, asking if he intended to do anything. She emphasized that he was the homeroom teacher and that Shiori was clearly having problems, further asking if he shouldn't at least listen to her. Aizawa calmly replied that he was the one who understood the situation in Class 5 best and emphasized that it was not Yazaki's business to interfere. This answer stunned Yazaki. Yazaki was angry and said she would go talk to Shiori herself. But Aizawa suddenly slammed the door in her face, and he insisted that it was unnecessary. He asked her to stop interfering in this matter. Aizawa continued, saying that he had noticed before that Yazaki always had a special interest in Shiori and often showed favoritism towards the girl. He directly asked if there was any particular reason for this, while simultaneously pressuring her to answer. Hearing that question, Yazaki panicked, and she wondered if Aizawa knew her secret. She evaded the question, saying that as her homeroom teacher, Aizawa should quickly resolve the situation, and then left. Aizawa just stood there silently, watching her. After school, Shiori was walking home. She heard someone calling her name. When she turned around, she saw it was Manaka. He asked if she was free. Shiori happily replied that she was very free, so free that she didn't know what to do. Seeing her so excited surprised Manaka. Manaka then said that this matter involved Aizawa, which surprised Shiori. He continued, explaining that based on Aizawa's behavior last week, Manaka had a feeling there was something strange about Aizawa, and he decided to look up his name on the internet. When Shiori heard this, she was even more surprised, and she asked him if he had found anything. Manaka replied that there was only one post on the teacher's website about Aizawa moving here, and that was all he found in a document from that post. The post mentioned the school where Aizawa used to work, Kayama High School. Manaka had a feeling she had heard the name of this school somewhere before. And as he searched, he discovered some information. This school faced a major problem when a video of student bullying went viral about 6 months ago. The video was widely reported on the internet. Shiori admitted that she remembered the video and that it had been shown a lot on TV. Manaka agreed and went on to say that the student being bullied in the video had suffered extremely cruel violence. Information about the student's name, address, and even the workplace of their parents had also been leaked. Shiori was surprised and fell silent, while Manaka added that there was another detail mentioned in the article: that student's class and homeroom teacher at the time. Shiori cautiously asked who that teacher was, and Manaka replied that it was Aizawa. The scene shifts to Suzuki, who has just finished his shift and is deep in thought. Yazaki said she would be working late, so he would have to go home today. Suddenly, he remembered the photo from the class reunion. And he remembered Ryuko. Suzuki thought she was the organizer of the class reunion, and that she looked pretty good for her age. Suzuki decided to call her. I was thinking to myself that I should have some fun with other girls once in a while. She picked up the phone and asked if it was Suzuki. He apologized for calling late, and he thought he should compliment her before asking her out. Suzuki said that he had just been looking at a photo from the class reunion and thanked her for organizing it. Suzuki said he was very grateful to her, because without her contacting everyone, they certainly wouldn't have been able to gather them all together. Hearing this, Ryuko remained silent, not responding. Suzuki asked her if something was wrong, but then she suddenly said that she wasn't the one who had contacted everyone. Hearing this, Suzuki felt confused and asked what she meant by that. She explained that she had been asked to say that she was the one who organized the meeting. She was terrified and trembling as she said that he even knew her address. He didn't forget any details, and for the past 20 years, he has continued to hate her. He told her to wait, but she screamed and said she couldn't refuse because he seemed capable of destroying her life. Suzuki became angry and yelled at her, asking who she was talking about, but suddenly, Suzuki heard someone calling from behind. Suzuki turned around to look, and he realized it was Aizawa calling. Hearing Ryuko's voice, she said it was Aizawa. Aizawa smiled and said it was a coincidence, as they hadn't seen each other since the class reunion. Suzuki was astonished to hear that it was Aizawa who contacted everyone. Suzuki looked at Aizawa in surprise and shock, wondering if he was the one who had organized the class reunion. Aizawa chatted with Suzuki, saying it was a coincidence to meet him in a place like this, and smiled. Ryuko checked to see if Suzuki was still on the phone. He apologized to her, saying he would call back later, but she stopped him and told him not to call again. This shocked Suzuki. Ryuko cried and told Suzuki that he was the person Aizawa hated the most. She spread the information about the class reunion as requested, and does not wish to be involved further. She apologized and hung up the phone. Aizawa asked Suzuki if he was talking to Ryuko and apologized for overhearing their call. Aizawa went on to say that he had met her at the reunion and asked Suzuki if she had changed at all. At this point, Aizawa smiled when he saw Suzuki, and this is causing Suzuki concern. Suddenly, Aizawa called Suzuki and asked if he wanted to go for a drink. And Aizawa asked if Suzuki had some free time. Now, Suzuki and Aizawa were sitting in a cafe drinking coffee. Aizawa took a sip of coffee and said that the reunion truly brought back nostalgic feelings, and he was glad to have been there. He also said that more people had come than he expected. While Aizawa was talking, Suzuki thought about what Ryuko had said, that Aizawa hadn't forgotten anything. And the person Aizawa hated the most was him. Aizawa tried to say something, but Suzuki interrupted him. And I asked him what the purpose of organizing the reunion was. Was it to talk about old memories? Then Suzuki stood up and asked if today's meeting was a coincidence. Aizawa was silent for a moment. Then he smiled and said that this meeting was not a coincidence. These words shocked Suzuki greatly. Aizawa said that he found out at the reunion that Suzuki worked at Sanmaru Bank. Aizawa said that he had been standing outside the bank waiting for Suzuki to come out. This angered Suzuki, who shouted Aizawa's name. He started to panic and lit a cigarette, telling Aizawa to stop joking around like that. He asked why Aizawa was using such roundabout methods. Suzuki became increasingly angry and started shouting, asking if Aizawa was seeking revenge, and told him to go ahead and try if he thought he had the guts to do it. Aizawa simply looked at Suzuki and said he was wrong, which surprised Suzuki. Aizawa continued, saying that the reason he asked Ryuko to help organize the reunion was so that he could overcome his past. Some time ago, he attended a meeting for victims of school bullying, and he met many people who were still suffering from psychological wounds caused by bullying long ago. Aizawa recounted that someone at the meeting said that if they can confront their past seriously and meet and talk to the person who caused them trauma, they will be able to move forward. He went on to say that if the person who bullied him apologized, it could help him break free from his past. Suzuki asked if this was the reason Aizawa organized the reunion, and Aizawa replied, saying that was true. Aizawa went on to say that, of course, it was impossible for him to organize the reunion himself, so he flipped through their graduation album to find someone who could help him. And that person was Ryuko. He said she must have been very surprised when he suddenly contacted her through social media. Suzuki smoked in silence, and he asked Aizawa if what he said was true. If it was true, then it meant Aizawa was here to force Suzuki to apologize to him, right? Suzuki became annoyed and asked again, "Really? And now he's become so arrogant?" Suddenly, he stood up and asked Aizawa, "What do you mean by sorry? How long do you intend to stay in this past?" But then he suddenly looked at Aizawa with a threatening gaze. That sight terrified and panicked Suzuki. Suzuki put out his cigarette. He said he would just go to the restroom for a moment and then leave. Aizawa looked at the cigarette that Suzuki had just extinguished in the ashtray and recalled his past. A scene from the past flashes by. Suzuki holding a cigarette and telling Aizawa that he must be an ashtray and absolutely not let the cigarette butt fall. Aizawa was frightened as he held out his hand to catch the cigarette ash and at the same time agreed to Suzuki's request. Unexpectedly, Suzuki yelled, saying that even though he had only been told not to drop cigarette butts, he continued to drop them, and he would have to face the consequences. While the other kids were beating Aizawa up in the back, Suzuki looked at his cigarette and thought for a moment. He suddenly turned to the others and asked, if they press cigarette butts against someone's arm, wouldn't it get very hot? Hearing this question made everyone anxious, and they stopped beating Aizawa. Suzuki held the cigarette close to Aizawa's arm, while the other children anxiously asked him if it was a bad idea, and that with summer approaching, he would have to wear short-sleeve shirts, and the scar would be more visible. Suzuki gave a sinister laugh and said it was all right. As long as Aizawa wore long sleeves all summer, then he set Aizawa on fire with a cigarette. We hear Aizawa screaming in pain. Back to the present, Aizawa thought about what the bullies had said, that his scar would heal in about 10 years or so. As he recalled the past, he clutched his scar and began to tremble. Suzuki walked behind Aizawa. Suddenly, a waitress told them that the restaurant was about to close. Suzuki placed his hand on Aizawa's shoulder from behind to signal him. But Aizawa suddenly pushed Suzuki's hand away, screaming in fear. Seeing Aizawa's fear and reaction surprised Suzuki. Aizawa apologized and told him not to worry. Seeing this, Suzuki chuckled to himself. As they walked home, Suzuki thought that Aizawa hadn't changed at all. His mentality was still the same as it was in high school. Suzuki looked at Aizawa's outfit and wondered, was this just a cheap suit he bought secondhand for $20? Suzuki smiled and asked Aizawa where he worked, and asked if it was possible to get a business card from that company. Aizawa apologized and said that he didn't actually need a business card for his work. Hearing this, Suzuki chuckled sarcastically and asked why he didn't need a business card, then wondered if Aizawa worked part-time in retail. Suzuki thought to himself that Aizawa certainly didn't work anywhere prestigious. Suzuki called Aizawa over and put his arm around his shoulder, then asked him if it would have been better if Aizawa had died back in high school. This statement shocked Aizawa. Suzuki went on to ask if Aizawa was happy with his current life, given how he kept clinging to the past. Suzuki went on to say that it didn't matter if it was bullying, since it was all over 20 years ago anyway. Suzuki said that he had said this before, that Aizawa's melancholic personality was the reason he was bullied. However, Suzuki was suddenly interrupted by Aizawa. Aizawa looked Suzuki straight in the eye and asked him if he could say the same thing if the people he loved were bullied. Could he explain why they were bullied, given who they were? Suzuki looked at Aizawa and replied that those who are bullied lack skills and are unable to adapt to their circumstances. Suzuki smiled and said that he wouldn't be able to love such useless failures. Then Suzuki said it was very late and turned away. Suzuki warned Aizawa never to go near him again. At Aizawa's house, a classroom photo album with many crossed-out pictures. Aizawa is listening to a recording where Suzuki says, it doesn't matter if it was bullying, that it was all over 20 years ago. Aizawa sat in his chair, staring at his laptop, listening to the recording over and over again. Aizawa looked at the photo of Suzuki and his daughter. The next day at school, Aizawa continued teaching the class, saying that these were common problems in exams, and compared to other topics, they were easier to help improve scores. He reminded his students to study hard. Shiori sat thinking about what Manika had said and recalled Aizawa having once confessed to her that he too had experienced bullying. She wondered if Aizawa was behind what was happening to her. Is he subjecting his students to the same things he once went through? She wondered if Aizawa had encouraged the bullying that occurred at the school where he used to teach. And was he the one who sent her that video? She worried that she was overthinking things. When Aizawa finished his classes for the day, he reminded the students about the field trip that would take place in 2 days, and that with exams approaching, this might be their last chance to relax. However, even so, they still have to behave appropriately as students of the school. Shiori looked sad as she thought about the picnic. Everyone in the class already had their own group, but Shiori was the only one who was lonely and isolated. Yazaki stood outside the classroom and watched Shiori. Yazaki is worried about Shiori. Yazaki thought Shiori had become isolated after everything that had happened and tried to call her. But suddenly she noticed something. That's Aizawa. He was looking at her. This reminded her of his question about how she had always treated Shiori. Yazaki felt scared and started to walk away. Aizawa suddenly heard someone ask him if he was okay after yesterday. He saw Manaka and Shiori talking. Manaka told Shiori that he had rushed home and apologized for it. Shiori shyly replied that it wasn't the reason she left. Aizawa looked at them for a moment, then walked away. Now, Shiori is worried and says that she just lost her composure a little. And the discovery that Aizawa was the homeroom teacher involved in a notorious bullying case made her feel very uneasy. Shiori stood by the window and asked Manaka about the victim in the video after the incident occurred. Manaka replied that he didn't know and wondered if Aizawa knew what had happened. Manaka went on to say that the person they were talking about was Aizawa, so there was no reason he would tell her if she only asked like that. Manaka agreed and apologized, asking if it would be okay if she didn't return to class. Shiori replied that it was all right, and she asked if they could chat a little longer. Because she felt really pained having to be alone in class, Nagumo said that they were together in the hallway, and they looked truly dazzling doing so with smug smiles. Hearing that made Himekawa uncomfortable. Yumi heard them and looked at them with a worried expression. Shiori was looking at her phone and walking when she heard someone call her name. She recognized it as Yumi. Shiori thanked him for the message and said she was very happy to receive it, and it had been a long time since they last talked. But Yumi stopped her and told her she should stop talking to Manaka, because it seems Himekawa likes him, and she looked annoyed when she heard they were talking to each other. Shiori was surprised and panicked, hastily telling Yumi that she knew nothing about it. Yumi replied, "Now, you know, right?" And as Yumi turned away, she told Shiori that she had warned her because it was worth it. Suddenly, Shiori asked her if that was true, and if they hadn't been friends until recently. They chatted very casually, very excitedly planning their school trip, such as where they go in their free time and other things. But Yumi stopped her. She turned around and asked Shiori if she knew how selfish she was. Yumi said that Shiori often came to ask questions about things she didn't understand, even though she was trying to learn on her own and always took her notes as if they were her own. Yumi bluntly stated that she was actually a nuisance, which shocked Shiori. Yumi then went on to ask if Shiori's personality was the reason her gym outfit was thrown away, and then left. Shiori fell into a dazed state. I started to wonder if it was my fault that she was all alone like this. While Shiori was deep in thought, suddenly, Himekawa walked past her and unexpectedly kicked her in the back. Shiori fell face down onto the ground. We see fear and shock in Shiori's eyes as she tries to stand up, and hear Himekawa say that she feels better now. Himekawa was on the phone, recounting how she had just dumped Shiori and saying that tension shouldn't be allowed to build up for too long. She laughed and joked with her friend while Shiori remained lying on the ground, trembling. Shiori began to cry while lying on the ground. Now in class, we hear Nagumo saying that Himekawa has already done it. Another person asked her what she had done, and Nagumo replied that Himekawa had just kicked Shiori from behind. Aizawa is the person Nagumo is talking to. Hearing that Shiori had been dumped, he said with a malicious expression that it sounded painful. Shiori walked home, while people on the street stared at her in her dirty uniform. Shiori looked sad. When thinking about Yumi's question, was it because of her personality that her gym uniform was thrown away? Shiori stood in front of the house. She took a deep breath, walked in, smiled broadly, and said she was home. But as soon as she walked in, she saw her mother standing there. She looked at her with disappointment and said that she had just received a phone call. Shiori was startled and wondered if it was a call from the school. Shiori tried to explain, but her mother interrupted her and said it was a call from a teacher at the tutoring school. The teacher at the tutoring school announced that her test results this week were below average. Her mother went on to ask her if these results would make it difficult to get into her chosen university, especially since they had already enrolled her in an advanced class. Her mother said that if things continued like this, her father would be very disappointed. Shiori smiled and apologized, explaining that she hadn't achieved good results, but that was okay, because she would focus on improving. However, her mother stopped and asked why she wasn't staying. She looked at her with disappointment and said that she should stay behind and not participate in the school trip. Her mother continued to say that she had no right to leave now and that her father would surely agree. Hearing these words, Shiori fell silent. She tried to speak, but her mother sensed something. Her mother asked her about her dirty clothes. Hearing this question, Shiori suddenly recalled the time she'd been bullied and felt anxious. She wanted to say something, but her mother interrupted her when she asked why she had come home in that state, and she said that outfit was really ugly. Hearing her own mother say that shocked Shiori. Shiori's mother said she would talk to the school about the trip now, but Shiori ignored her and ran into her room. She closed the door while her mother called after her, saying she was still talking to her. Shiori started to cry, and she thought about calling her father, but then she remembered he said he was busy with work. She didn't want to worry him, so she sat down and continued thinking. At the very least, she wanted her father by her side. However, the reality was that her father wasn't on business. He was with Yazaki. At school, Nagumo was playing with an Erlenmeyer flask when someone called her name. She turned around and saw it was Aizawa. He asked her to stop messing with the things in there, and she smiled happily and agreed. She asked Aizawa if Shiori would be in class today, and he replied, "Who knows?" Nagumo smiled and said that his plan from the previous day had been successful. Nagumo asked him if he had intentionally scolded Yumi for taking Himekawa's phone during science class. Nagumo wondered if that incident had caused Yumi to harbor resentment toward Shiori. Nagumo went on to say that if Shiori's best friend left her, wouldn't she be left with no one else? Nagumo became very excited and said that it was really interesting. Aizawa was silent for a moment, then said that Nagumo talked too much. She agreed and said that she could talk to him about anything. Anyway, from that day on, he was on their side. Nagumo said that about a month ago, when he saw her putting trash on Shiori's desk, she thought he would surely be angry. But he pretended not to see anything. Nagumo smiled and went on to say that although he should protect his students, she was surprised to see him siding with the bully. Aizawa replied that he didn't want to get involved in any trouble. Nagumo responded, saying that perhaps that was true, and she laughed menacingly as she asked him if he was enjoying bullying Shiori. Nagumo said she could tell from his expression. Aizawa asked her why she hated Shiori so much. And did anything happen in the past? Nagumo was stunned when he heard this, but suddenly she received a phone call. She picked it up and spoke to someone. After the call, she said that Shiori had arrived, and it seemed like Himekawa was leading her behind the school to do something. Nagumo smirked and said it looked interesting, then asked Aizawa if he wanted to come along. Hearing that, Aizawa smiled. Later, in the area behind the school, the 4 girls surrounded Shiori. They asked her if she wanted to talk. Himekawa got annoyed and said that doing it like that was too much trouble and asked Shiori to hurry up. Shiori bowed her head in apology. This surprised the girls. Shiori thought about what Yumi had said again, and she said she didn't know when she had hurt her best friend. And she thought the reason she was isolated in class was because of her own attitude and actions. Hearing this, Yumi said nothing. Shiori continued, trembling, saying that she was truly sorry for causing trouble for all of them. Meanwhile, Aizawa stood behind a wall and watched everything unfold. They questioned Shiori about Manaka and why she went looking for him, which angered Himekawa. Shiori immediately refuted this, saying it was false. They went on to say they didn't know and couldn't believe her just because she said so. Suddenly, someone called her name, and we see Nagumo laughing and clapping, saying, "Well said, Shiori." Nagumo's clapping confused Shiori. Nagumo went on to say that they were all worried about Shiori and didn't know what to do if she continued acting like that without remorse. Nagumo smiled and said she was happy that Shiori had finally taken a look at herself. She had intended to tell Shiori, but ultimately it was important that Shiori figured it out herself. Himekawa nodded in agreement. Suddenly, Nagumo became serious, approached Shiori, and said that it was entirely her fault for leaving trash in her bag and getting kicked from behind. This terrified Shiori. Nagumo went on to say that this was a great opportunity and asked why Shiori didn't start changing today. She told Shiori to start by listing 10 things she thought were wrong about herself. This left Shiori bewildered and sweating. They told her to hurry up and say those things and demanded that she apologize. Shiori should sit down to continue. Now, Aizawa is still watching from afar as he hears Shiori say that her personality is selfish. Suddenly, Himekawa yelled, saying that her flirting with her friend's boyfriend was unacceptable. Shiori repeated after her. Seeing this, Aizawa thought, there's currently no one around to protect Shiori, and if things continue like this, she'll start thinking it's all her fault. In Aizawa's mind, he thought that was how they would slowly brainwash her. And he thought of Suzuki. Aizawa told Suzuki to look at the punishment he had given himself 20 years ago, and which was now being given to his daughter. Aizawa clenched his fist and walked away. Now, the girl asked Shiori if she had said all 10 things yet. Another girl replied that she probably had, and her throat was dry. Yet another girl agreed. Himekawa told Shiori she would get a can of cola, while the other girl said she would get strawberry milk. Shiori looked around, confused and not understanding what was happening. Nagumo asked Yumi what she wanted, but Yumi hesitated before saying she was fine. Suddenly, Nagumo became scary and intimidating towards Yumi, asking her again what she wanted to drink. This frightened Yumi, and she said she would drink the orange juice. Nagumo said she would drink the orange juice too, and they would pay each other back later. Nagumo bent down, looked at Shiori, and smiled maliciously. She said there was no point in her going to look for Aizawa, because after all, he was on their side. Hearing this, Shiori was confused and frightened. She ran away from there. While running, she met Minaka. He tried to greet her, but she just glanced at him and walked away. This confused him. After school, Shiori went home and suddenly received a phone call. She recognized it was Aizawa. He said he received a call from her mother, who said she wouldn't be going on the school trip tomorrow. He went on to ask if she was feeling unwell, but Shiori interrupted him, saying she couldn't believe he could talk to her so casually. She began to tremble and said that Nagumo had told her that he was on their side and asked him if he knows about all the previous instances of harassment. She went on to say that he might even be helping them and yelled, accusing him of making her go through the same things he had gone through in the past. But suddenly, Aizawa called her and smiled. He said that it was impossible for him to do that. He wondered why Nagumo would lie like that. Shiori then told him that she had realized something. She said that every time he lied, he always smiled. This surprised Aizawa. She went on to say that she might be partly to blame and that she would try to endure this painful situation. She begged him not to release her video. After she finished speaking, she left. Aizawa adjusted his tie, noticing something sparkling on it. At Shiori's house, she's sleeping. She thought she should thank her mother, because thanks to her mother, she was able to avoid going to school tomorrow. She knew she couldn't possibly endure being with all of them for 3 days and 2 nights. Suddenly, she heard someone call her name. She woke up and saw it was Suzuki. He told Shiori that he had just returned from a business trip last night. He looked at her and smiled, saying that he heard her mother say that she should stay and study instead of going on the study trip. He patted her head and said it was all right, because he had convinced her mother to let her go on this trip. This left Shiori shocked and confused. He went on to say that her mother was terrible for preventing her from going on the trip, and that he had contacted the school to resolve the issue. Shiori was terrified. She tried to say something, but he stopped her and said this would be her last chance to go on a trip like this. He recalled how much fun he had had when he went. He smiled and said that when she returned from Kyoto, he would look forward to hearing all the stories from her. Shiori felt scared and thought that she actually didn't want to go on that trip. Suzuki left the room, having just spoken to someone on the phone. Shiori sat on the bed in despair. At school, Aizawa was on the bus, instructing everyone to sit in their assigned seats. Nagumo and Yumi sat next to each other, and Nagumo asked Yumi if she wanted some candy. Yumi thanked them and accepted the candy, saying she was really looking forward to the trip to Kyoto. Nagumo agreed, but suddenly she noticed something. She saw Shiori and was surprised, because Shiori's eyes looked dark and lifeless. Nagumo saw Shiori passing by and said that the trip to Kyoto would be fun. But she also had something that concerned her. She handed the phone to Yumi and said she had received this last night from someone she wasn't following. She showed Yumi a video of Shiori and asked if it was Shiori. Yumi watched the video, feeling shocked and worried. Nagumo said she was also surprised to see the video and wondered what would happen to Shiori if it were leaked. All the students sat at the train station, while Aizawa reminded them that there were other people on the train, so they had to make sure not to disturb anyone. While Aizawa was saying that, Yumi looked at Shiori and thought about the video. She was worried and recalled Nagumo's question. What would happen if Shiori's video were leaked? We see Aizawa sitting on the train when suddenly someone calls out to him. It was Yazaki. She asked if he had some time. Aizawa replied that he did, and she asked if he would take on the responsibility of taking attendance before bedtime and sign up for the 3-hour patrol. He smiled and asked her if there was a problem. Yazaki looked at him suspiciously. Then she sat down beside him and said that she thought he would be the type to avoid such tasks, and asked why he had done so this time. Aizawa looked at Yazaki and said that it was because he was that kind of person, and he would work hard to make up for all the times he had avoided it before. He smiled and said that he had to do his best to support the students so that they could create beautiful memories. Yazaki looked at him suspiciously. Suddenly, someone asked if they were going to Nara on the first day. Nagumo mentioned a park with deer and temples, to which Himekawa replied that who cared about those temples? She smiled and continued to ask, "Isn't the place they'll be staying rather strange?" Nagumo agreed. Nagumo said there were only 2 stars online. While everyone was talking, Yumi remained silent. She thought they hadn't mentioned the video, and should she say anything to Himekawa? But then suddenly, Nagumo said she found an interesting video. This terrified Yumi. She wondered if Nagumo intended to show them the video. The other girls were excited and asked Nagumo what the video was. Nagumo glanced at her phone and said she had the video, a mischievous grin on her face. Yumi was worried about Shiori and was about to call Nagumo, but suddenly Aizawa appeared and told them they were being too noisy. Aizawa reminded them that mobile phones were prohibited on this trip, and depending on the situation, they might be confiscated. He looked over and saw Teacher Kaneda, the counselor, was walking towards them, simultaneously asking everyone to remain silent. Seeing Kaneda, Nagumo thought to herself that she was lucky she hadn't been discovered, because otherwise Kaneda would certainly have confiscated her phone, and she thanked Aizawa for his timely assistance. Yumi was worried and trembling. She suddenly asked Nagumo if she had some time. Now, in the women's restroom, Shiori is washing her hands. She thought that if she just tried her best and kept her distance during her free time, she would get through these 3 days and 2 nights without any problems. She told herself that everything would be all right. But suddenly, she heard someone ask, "Do you have anything to say?" This was followed by the question about what happened on the bus. Shiori recognized the voices and saw Yumi and Nagumo standing in front of her. Nagumo said that the video was sent to her yesterday. Shiori was very surprised to hear this. Yumi asked Nagumo if she knew who had sent her the video. Nagumo replied that she didn't know, but the person was in the infirmary, so it must be someone from the school. Yumi thought that besides Himekawa, there were others who harbored resentment towards Shiori. Nagumo ended the conversation and said she would leave right away, but Yumi stopped her and said she shouldn't show that video to other people. Nagumo stopped and turned around. Yumi hesitated, saying that she wasn't bullying Shiori, but only helping her improve, and that if the video went viral, Shiori wouldn't be able to recover. Even worse, she might end her own life. Nagumo replied, saying she understood, then laughed and said she would delete the video. Hearing this, Yumi was surprised and asked if she really would delete it. Nagumo replied that doing so would be too much. Then Nagumo laughed eerily, thinking that if Shiori ended her own life, she would no longer have a chance to play with her. Shiori heard all of this and felt terrified. Now, the students are in Nara. Aizawa is feeding the deer. He watched them and smiled as they ate. Suddenly, someone called him. It was Nagumo, and she thanked him for earlier. Hearing this, Aizawa felt confused. She continued, saying that he had signaled for her when her phone was almost confiscated. She said she was surprised because she had thought Shiori definitely wouldn't be joining the trip. Aizawa agreed with Nagumo, and unexpectedly, she realized something. Nagumo called out to Aizawa and pointed to a deer, asking him why it had separated from the herd. Aizawa replied that it might be because it was a male deer. Generally, male deer tend to live alone, while female deer always stay with the herd. Hearing this, Nagumo said that, as expected, he was a science teacher and knew a lot about animals. She started laughing and joked that she thought the deer was being bullied because it smelled strange. He looked at her and said that bullying happens in the animal kingdom too. That's the law of survival of the fittest. Keeping the weaker ones in the pack is also beneficial. He continued, sometimes animals intentionally weaken certain members to use them as prey for predators, thereby increasing the chances of survival for the entire herd. Nagumo smiled when he heard that, and she said they needed to get Shiori back to the herd as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Shiori sat alone in the park, feeling anxious and uneasy. Shiori was thinking about what Nagumo had said in the restroom yesterday. She thought that if Nagumo received the video yesterday, then she wasn't the one who filmed it, and wondered if Aizawa was the one who had filmed it. Shiori doubted whether Nagumo had actually deleted the video, and she wondered what she should do if that video still existed. She wondered how she would handle it if the video still leaked. Suddenly, she saw Himekawa talking to Manaka, saying that they both liked animals. Himekawa went on to say that she wanted to be friends with him, but then she noticed Shiori was watching them. Seeing this, Himekawa smiled and approached Manaka, asking him if he knew what Shiori really liked. She went on to say that Shiori was actually quite crazy and that she was the type of person who valued socializing with men more than friendships with other girls. Manaka paid no attention and watched Shiori walk away. In the evening, at the hotel where the students were staying, the girls were chatting and saying that the hotel was better than they had expected. Himekawa noticed Nagumo and asked if she was all right. Nagumo replied that nothing was wrong, but when she smiled at the girls, she thought to herself how boring it was, and she wondered where Shiori was hiding, because this place was really not interesting at all. Suddenly, Shiori appeared right in front of them. Nagumo looked annoyed as he asked Shiori if she needed anything. Shiori hesitated for a moment before saying that she felt a little lonely being alone, and asked if she could join their group without bothering anyone. Nagumo replied she smiled and said that she would be very happy for Shiori to join. Then she asked Shiori to sit with them. Shiori thanked her and sat down. Nagumo asked her, "You weren't invited to our group chat, were you?" Shiori replied, "Yes." Nagumo opened her phone and told her to wait a moment. While Nagumo was using her phone, Shiori looked at the screen. But suddenly Nagumo hid her phone and said she didn't need to look so closely. She insisted on inviting Shiori to join the group, which surprised Shiori a little. Then Shiori apologized for peeking. After Shiori joined the group, the girls said it was time for a bath and they prepared to go take a shower. In the bathroom, the girls praised the bathroom for being so comfortable. Someone asked where Shiori was, and another person replied that she had gone back to her room because she had forgotten to bring her new underwear. Himekawa suddenly asked Nagumo if she was really trying to befriend Shiori. Nagumo smiled and replied, "Of course." Himekawa says that Nagumo has a terrible personality, and Nagumo agrees, saying that she would feel guilty if she kept abandoning Shiori. While Nagumo washed her face, she smiled to herself, thinking that this was the best thing ever. Because Shiori, who used to be outstanding in the basketball club, now Shiori was just her dog. She smiled maliciously. Suddenly, someone asked if she had been in there too long and said she should have gone back already. At that moment, Nagumo realized something. She immediately stood up and ran, thinking it was impossible, when the girls called her name. Nagumo ran to check his laundry basket. She found her phone was missing, and she remembered Shiori looking at her phone. She thought Shiori had looked too closely, and Shiori was definitely looking at her lock screen wallpaper. Nagumo wondered if Shiori was trying to delete the video, or if she thought Nagumo was the one who filmed it. She began to tremble with anger, thinking that Shiori was just her dog, and she screamed in anger, "How dare you bite me back!" Somewhere in the hotel, Shiori opened Nagumo's phone and thought, Now, all she needs to do is delete her video. She wondered where the video was and eventually found it. Looking at the date, she felt confused because it was the day she had actually been in the infirmary. She thought that when Nagumo said she received the video yesterday, it was a lie, and that Nagumo himself had filmed the video that day and sent it to her. Shiori deletes video, and she started walking back to her room. She thought the video had been completely deleted. As she stood at the door of the room, she thought that all she'd left to do today was sleep. She would feel embarrassed sharing a room with Yumi, but she will try to sleep without thinking too much about it. As soon as she entered the room, she saw the girls waiting. Nagumo smiled and said that the thief had returned. Hearing that, Shiori was terrified, and she tried to ask them why they were there. Nagumo replied that they were thinking of staying overnight. She approached Shiori and asked her where her phone was. Shiori replied that she didn't know. Nagumo became angry and told Shiori not to lie, accusing her of being a thief and asking where she'd been for the past 2 hours. Nagumo sighed and said that she was disappointed in Shiori because she didn't realize her mistake at all. Shiori said that it might be partly her fault. Then she recalled the video, and she screamed that she couldn't remember doing anything to deserve it. At that moment, Nagumo approached her, and unexpectedly, Nagumo slapped Shiori. Nagumo asked Shiori what she was thinking to dare to talk back, but suddenly they heard a knock on the door. Someone announced that they would be taking roll call before bedtime. Hearing that, the whole group panicked and realized it was Aizawa. Nagumo opened the door while the others tried to stop him. After opening the door, Nagumo told Aizawa that there was nothing to worry about. Aizawa saw the girls and said that there didn't seem to be any problem. Aizawa's reaction surprised Himekawa. She asked Nagumo why Aizawa hadn't warned them about the room change. Nagumo replied that Aizawa was on their side. She told Shiori that the punishment had been approved by the teacher. Hearing this, Yumi felt stunned. Aizawa walked out of the room with a serious expression on his face. Himekawa and the other girls held Shiori, while Nagumo said they should begin the punishment. Nagumo looked at Shiori and smiled. Seeing that smile frightened Shiori. Suddenly, Nagumo realized something. She said that now that she thinks about it, Shiori didn't take a shower, right? Himekawa agreed with her, and the other girl said that Shiori didn't smell like she'd just showered. She even smelled bad, which really ruined their mood. Nagumo said it wasn't good for a 15-year-old girl to skip bathing, and told them to take Shiori to the restroom. Himekawa grabbed the shower head and started pouring water on Shiori, saying she needed to clean herself. Nagumo and the other girls started laughing. Yumi felt guilty about this. The girls laughed and told Shiori that she was lucky the room had a bathroom, then asked if she wanted them to bathe her from the beginning. Shiori asked them to stop, and then the water suddenly stopped. To her surprise, Nagumo applied soap to her and said that she had already said it. The reason she was in this situation was due to her own shortcomings. Nagumo went on to say that's why no one in the class was on Shiori's side, not even her basketball club teammates. Hearing this shocked Shiori. She recalled the past when her teammates in the basketball club asked her if she was going to leave the club. She sadly agreed. And she said that there are exams next year and she has a lot to think about. Although their team spirit eventually improved, she apologized to them. One teammate said it was heartbreaking to see her leave. They smiled and said that even if she left the club, it wouldn't change the fact that they would still be friends. Shiori smiled and her eyes welled up with happiness, but suddenly she noticed the look of panic on her face. She heard her teammates say, "What kind of excuse is that?" and that it was their situation too. They mocked her and said that Shiori only thought of herself. Returning to the present, Nagumo asked Shiori where her phone was. Shiori sat in silence. Nagumo became serious and said that she still hadn't admitted it. She told Himekawa to warm the water a little more. Himekawa turned on the water and sprayed it all over Shiori. Shiori started screaming in pain. Yumi watched everything that was happening with astonishment and fear. She called Nagumo and said that perhaps they should stop. Nagumo asked why. Then she immediately laughed and said that Yumi was actually on Shiori's side. Hearing that left Yumi feeling confused. Nagumo went on to say that Yumi was even certain she hadn't shared that video, and Nagumo questioned whether the two were working together to get her phone. Yumi objected, saying she hadn't done anything like that. Thinking back the past 2 hours, no one else could have taken it. And she hoped Shiori would quickly speak up and tell them that she had nothing to do with this. Nagumo thought for a moment. Nagumo then asked Yumi if she could consider herself Shiori's best friend. Hearing that frightened Yumi, she looked at Shiori, who was crying and soaking wet. Yumi wondered if she was really Shiori's best friend, and if she was, why didn't Shiori tell them she wasn't involved? To protect Shiori, Yumi spoke to Nagumo and asked her not to spread the video. However, Shiori didn't appreciate it at all and even tried to belittle her. Yumi continued to think that this was just Shiori's nature. While studying, she used Yumi as a convenient tool. She wondered if it was really necessary to go through all of this. She thought it was unnecessary, and that was Shiori's fault. This was bound to happen eventually, and if you look at it this way, Yumi suddenly spoke up and said, "Best friend? It's impossible! How could someone so selfish be her friend?" Hearing this, Shiori was shocked and heartbroken. Nagumo approached Shiori and said that this is what Yumi thinks of her, and that she is completely alone now. Nagumo asked Shiori if it wasn't time she told them where the phone was. She went on to say that it seemed the shower could reach 60 degrees Celsius. Hearing this, Shiori panicked and said that the phone was on the 4th floor near the emergency exit. The girl said that Shiori had finally confessed and that she would go get it. Nagumo thanked her and said that the girl was wonderful. Shiori was soaking wet, sitting on a piece of cloth while the girls looked at her. Nagumo approached Shiori, and she said that she had previously stated that she didn't know where her phone was. She went on to say that even if the video hadn't gone viral, Shiori's reputation would have been beyond repair, and she asked Shiori if she understood. Shiori remained silent after hearing all of this. Nagumo became angry and shouted, demanding an answer. Shiori weakly replied, "Yes." Hearing this, Nagumo asked where she had gone, how she had lost all her usual vitality. Then she turned to Yumi and asked if she thought Shiori felt any remorse. Yumi hesitated and replied that she wasn't sure either. Suddenly, the door opened, causing Nagumo to turn around and thank the other girl for bringing the phone. But the girl held up her phone, revealing that it was cracked. Seeing this, everyone was astonished and asked what had happened and why the phone was no longer working. Nagumo turned to look at Shiori in disbelief, while Shiori, equally shocked and frightened, hastily stated that she hadn't done it. Himekawa didn't believe her and shouted, demanding that Shiori stop lying. But suddenly, a voice called from the door, asking them what was happening inside, and said that they had received complaints from students on this floor. Hearing this, the other girls were all frightened. They recognized the voices as those of the 2 counselors, Kaneda and Yazaki. While the girls were whispering in confusion, Nagumo quietly entered the shower area. The remaining girls continued to worry, saying the situation was truly terrible. They couldn't offer any reasonable excuse when Shiori was soaking wet and sitting on the floor like that. Suddenly, Yazaki burst in and threw the door wide open. When he saw Shiori sitting on the floor, completely soaked, both Yazaki and Kaneda were stunned by the sight. Yazaki shouted, asking the girls what they were doing there. But then Nagumo, who was also getting wet, smiled and apologized to Yazaki. Nagumo said they had gone a little overboard playing in the water. Nagumo approached Shiori and explained that they were just having a little fun with the water. Hearing this, Yazaki felt suspicious and confused. Meanwhile, Kaneda believed Nagumo's explanation. Kaneda said that he understood the girls were close, but they shouldn't do things like that. Seeing Kaneda believe the explanation, Yazaki was surprised, and Yazaki asked him if he really thought it was that simple. At this moment, Nagumo and Himekawa exchanged knowing smiles. Unexpectedly, another person entered the room. It was Aizawa. He asked what had happened here. His appearance surprised Yazaki, and she asked him where he had been. Aizawa replied that he had just been in the restroom. Yazaki was angry and asked if that was true. Seeing Yazaki so tense, Kaneda advised her to calm down. Kaneda then explained to Aizawa that it seemed some students had sneaked out and were making noise. Aizawa was surprised to hear this. Kaneda instructed the girls to return to their rooms and informed them that upon returning home, they would have to write letters of apology. When the girls left, Yazaki called Aizawa Yazaki was drying Shiori off. Yazaki told Aizawa that she would be in charge of patrolling tonight and tomorrow and pleaded with him to let her handle it herself. Aizawa agreed and left. As he walked out, Yazaki looked at him suspiciously. The next morning, the other students started talking about what had happened to Nagumo's phone. They considered the incident terrible and wondered why Shiori would steal the phone. Some speculated that perhaps it was because the phone was a newer model, and they even joked that Shiori might be planning to sell it. They laughed at Shiori and said she was terrible. Meanwhile, Nagumo stood at a distance, smiling as he listened to the negative comments about Shiori. Shortly afterward, Aizawa approached Nagumo and said that the situation involving her phone was a complete mess. Nagumo agreed, saying it was indeed a disaster. Nagumo went on to say that the video from the infirmary was a masterpiece, and she never expected Shiori to go so far as to destroy her phone just to get rid of the video. Aizawa felt confused and asked about the video. Hearing this, Nagumo explained that she'd never really told him the whole story. Nagumo asked Aizawa if he had seen her visit Shiori while Shiori was sleeping in the infirmary the day before. The story then flashes back to the past, where Aizawa asks the nurse about Shiori's condition. The nurse replies that Shiori is fine. The nurse tells Aizawa that Shiori is asleep. He unexpectedly turned around, and he saw Nagumo leaving the room. Nagumo turned to look at him, giving him a smile that he noticed. As we approached Shiori's bed, Aizawa sensed that something wasn't right. Back in the present, Aizawa tells Nagumo that Shiori's clothes seem to have been disheveled. Nagumo agrees and reveals that she filmed a somewhat sensitive video. She went on to say that she shouldn't have deleted the fake account she created to send the video. Hearing this, Aizawa asked her if she still had any copies of the video. Nagumo looked disappointed and replied that no, because she didn't think things would go this far. She walked along, thinking to herself that she would have to come up with another interesting plan. As Nagumo left, she smiled. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked at her with disgust and muttered to himself, "You piece of trash!" On the second free day of the trip, Shiori said she wasn't feeling well and stayed in her room to rest. That night, Yazaki was in charge of patrolling, and no incidents like the first night occurred. The school trip ended peacefully. Upon returning to Tokyo, Aizawa is walking down the street. He suddenly stopped and greeted someone. Aizawa met Yazaki and greeted her, complimenting her on the good work she had done on the trip. He asked if she had anything she needed to discuss with him. Yazaki replied and explained that she had just dropped Shiori off at home. On the way, she had asked Shiori if she was being bullied, but Shiori only replied that it was her fault. Yazaki continued, insisting that it was impossible for the bullied person to be at fault and that Shiori was feeling too much pressure to tell the truth. But midway through, she suddenly stopped. Seeing this, Aizawa smiled and remarked that Yazaki seemed very enthusiastic when talking about Shiori. He asked her if she had any special relationship with Shiori's father. This question startled Yazaki, and she immediately thought that Aizawa really knew something. After a moment, she admitted it, asking him in return if he knew. Later, she agreed with him and confessed that she had a relationship with Shiori's father. Aizawa looked at Yazaki sternly and said that she was having an affair with the father of a student. Hearing this, Yazaki became angry, retorting that her relationship was not like a typical secret affair. Yazaki went on to tell Aizawa that she and Shiori's father were truly in love. She explained that, unfortunately, Shiori's father no longer had feelings for his current wife. After what happened during the field trip, she found the resolve to make a decision. Yazaki declared that she would protect Shiori. With a determined look in her eyes, she affirmed that she had decided to become Shiori's mother. Hearing that left Aizawa completely speechless. Yazaki continued, emphasizing that she needed to make sure she was always by Shiori's side. Suddenly, Aizawa burst into loud laughter. His actions confused Yazaki. She asked him what he was laughing at. Aizawa, still laughing, replied that he couldn't maintain a serious expression after what she'd just said. Still smiling, he asked, "You said you've made up your mind. Who cares about that?" Then, he became more serious and asked Yazaki if she had ever considered Shiori's feelings. He couldn't believe she could declare herself Shiori's mother without taking that into account. These words left Yazaki speechless, and then she suddenly became angry. She retorted, saying she didn't want to hear these things from someone who was willing to ignore bullying, while Aizawa was engrossed in his phone. Aizawa went on to tell Yazaki that, aside from everything she had said, he didn't think the man she mentioned actually loved her. Hearing this, Yazaki showed her displeasure, saying that she had other things to do and leaving. As she left, she angrily exclaimed that Aizawa didn't know what he was talking about. At Shiori's house, her mother was washing dishes when she suddenly heard the phone ring. She picked up the phone and realized the call was from Yazaki. This surprised her. Just then, Suzuki emerged from the bathroom, drying his hair and saying how refreshing it felt to have taken a shower. He asked his wife to bring him some beer. She apologized and said she would prepare it right away. We see her pouring beer into a glass. But in the meantime, she hesitated and slowly said that he had received a call. She paused, mentioning that the call was from Shiori's club advisor, and she tried to explain that perhaps they had exchanged phone numbers and Yazaki was just calling about this. However, Suzuki immediately became enraged and threw the glass of beer in her face. While she was covering her face, he yelled at her, asking what she thought she was doing and whether she thought he was having an affair. Suzuki approached, angrily scolding her, saying she was so useless that she couldn't even properly oversee their daughter's education. Suzuki continued to yell at Shiori's mother, asking if there was something wrong with her, since she had told Shiori to skip the school trip and stay home to study. She spoke slowly. Tears streamed down her face as she said she knew he would be happy if Shiori got a high score. Suzuki looked at her with contempt. And Suzuki said it was all right and told her to go wash her face. As she was wiping the beer off the floor, she gently apologized to him for asking such a strange question. Suzuki replied that there was no way he would ever fall in love with another woman. Hearing this, she felt happy and cried with joy. Suzuki looked at his watch and said that Shiori was getting quite late. Shiori stood in front of the train tracks. In her eyes was utter despair. She stood there, thinking about what her friends had said, that they thought she only cared about herself. She recalled what Nagumo had said, that even if her video didn't go viral, she couldn't salvage the situation, and Yumi's words, that she wouldn't be friends with such a selfish person. She remembered Yumi's words again. Then suddenly, a train was speeding towards her. Shiori looked at the train and began to tremble. As the train passed by, she sat down. My body was still trembling with fear, and I wondered what I was about to do. Suddenly, she realized someone was standing nearby. That person was Aizawa. He asked her what she was thinking about so deeply, and then smiled. Seeing him made her feel flustered. Aizawa said he was worried she would jump. Shiori was shocked and asked why, and she asked if he was following her. He replied that of course not, this was just his way home. He was about to ask her what she was trying to do just now, but Shiori immediately asked him if he wanted to know why she had thought about suicide. She looked at him with a skeptical expression. Then she suddenly shouted, asking why he was worried about her at this moment. She said that he didn't care about her after witnessing what had happened to her on the school trip. Aizawa remained silent, not responding. Shiori continued, saying that he always did everything he could to avoid trouble. And if she really had decided to end her own life, then he might have to take responsibility. She stopped when she heard Aizawa tell her not to be so foolish. Shiori remained silent as Aizawa approached and asked her if she really thought he would treat her that way. She said nothing, then later admitted that she knew Nagumo had filmed the video and that he might not even know she had done it. Shiori angrily shouted, claiming that Aizawa had pretended not to see anything to avoid facing the issue. Aizawa remained silent. He was trying to say something about Nagumo, but suddenly the phone rang. Shiori answered the call. And she was talking to her father. When Aizawa realized she was talking to Suzuki, he became serious. Suzuki asked Shiori why she hadn't gone home yet, even though it was so late. Suzuki then asked if she was with friends. This made Shiori anxious. She tried to answer, but Aizawa unexpectedly reached out his hand, surprising her. He asked her if he should tell Suzuki about her situation. Suzuki then asked her if anything was wrong and who she was with. Shiori replied she told him not to worry and said she was with friends. Shiori went on to tell Suzuki that she was going home and hung up. After the call ended, Aizawa said he would walk her home. Shiori replied that she was fine and that her house wasn't too far. While Shiori was on her way home, Aizawa called her over and told her that he was always on her side. She paused, thinking about Aizawa's smile when he lied. And she wondered what kind of expression he had on his face at that moment. At this moment, Suzuki was drinking alcohol and thanking someone while walking. He was thinking about the most important branch, which would be announced on Monday, and they met all the targets. He felt he had clearly played a significant role in running the branch. While thinking about this, Suzuki suddenly received a call from Shiori. He saw her smile and wave at him. He called her over, thinking that it had been a long time since he'd spent a weekend with his daughter and that he should forget about work today. When he handed her the drink, he thought it was what a good father would do, then asked her about her school trip. This question surprised Shiori. Shiori replied that the school trip was quite fun. This made Suzuki think. He asked her if she had taken any pictures, as he hadn't seen any yet. Shiori was worried and silent, thinking that she hadn't taken a single photo, and whatever she said would sound strange. Unexpectedly, Suzuki called out to her, laughing, and asked if she had forgotten to charge her camera. He went on to say that she was always very clumsy with such things, and asked if she was forbidden from using her phone. These questions made Shiori feel stressed. Finally, she spoke up, and she told her father that things weren't going so well at school. And the trip wasn't as fun as she said. She thought that she had always appeared cheerful in front of her parents, not wanting to worry them. She went on to say that someone was causing her friends to turn against her, and that it was really difficult. She wanted to tell her father that the truth was she was being bullied, but Suzuki interrupted her and said it was because of jealousy. Hearing this left Shiori feeling confused. Suzuki went on to tell Shiori that she was lovely and academically gifted. He assumed there would surely be people who were jealous of her. But there was no reason for her to worry about people like that. He advised her that she should transfer to a prestigious private school the following year, where she could make friends with people of the same social standing. He said she still had Yumi, right? This surprised Shiori. Her father laughed and told her she shouldn't hang out with those fools, but should stay with smart students like Yumi. Shiori began to recall Yumi saying that she wasn't her friend, and she was about to say something to her father, but suddenly Suzuki noticed someone behind him. He saw Yazaki waving and smiling. Seeing her there startled Suzuki. He immediately stood up, deep in thought. Why is she here? And tells Shiori to apologize. Suzuki said he needed to go to the restroom. His father's actions confused Shiori. Then, Suzuki caught up with Yazaki and asked her what was really going on. Seeing Suzuki's reaction, Yazaki began to think about what Aizawa had said to her. Yazaki told Suzuki that no matter how many times she called, he didn't answer, which worried her. She smiled and said that she'd been watching him since he left the house. Hearing that, Suzuki felt terrified. In Suzuki's mind, she thought that the woman was a completely insane stalker. Yazaki continued, saying that she had watched them together and felt very warm seeing it. She smiled and said it would be great if she could become a part of it soon. She felt that their living together, despite their broken relationship, wasn't good for Shiori. Suzuki was completely horrified. She gently touched his cheek and said that when he finally divorced, they would make a happy family of 3. He felt the situation was too bad, and he asked if she could go home first, as his daughter was probably waiting for him. When he said that, he thought things were going off track. Yazaki left, but before telling him that she loved him. Suzuki watched her walk away and thought to himself that he had never loved her in his life. Suzuki thought he had her completely under control, but he never expected her to be capable of such things. He felt he had to quickly handle the situation and turned back to apologize to Shiori for leaving abruptly, then sat down. He asked her what they had said, but Shiori replied that it was nothing. She looked at her phone and remained silent. Next, Manaka is in the park and someone calls his name. It turned out to be Shiori. She apologized for calling him so suddenly, and he said it was okay. He said there were some rumors circulating and asked if she was okay. He said people were saying she had stolen Nagumo's phone. Shiori remained silent upon hearing this. He went on to say that she'd been avoiding him for the past few days, but she interrupted him and apologized. Shiori said that from now on, she didn't want to talk to him anymore. Not here, nor at school. This surprised Manaka. Manaka asked Shiori what had happened and if she was all right. He said that if she wanted, he would listen. Shiori was silent for a moment, worried. Finally, she decided to tell him everything that had happened to her. After hearing this, Manaka was surprised. Manaka said that it couldn't be called just teasing, but Shiori replied that it was her fault. Hearing that, he felt even more confused. She went on to say that none of her friends tried to protect her, not even Yumi, whom she thought was her best friend, or her basketball teammates. She thought there was no good reason for her to be bullied, but she might be wrong. She started trembling and said that the reason she was bullied was… But then she stopped. Manaka interrupted her, saying that was impossible. This statement surprised Shiori. He went on to say that he understood relationships could be strained by differences in personality, and that he had experienced that himself. But that's not the only reason she had to go through all that. That's definitely wrong. He went on to tell her that there's no excuse for being bullied, and there should never be one. Hearing all this, she began to tremble. And she told him that would be wonderful. She started crying uncontrollably and said it would be wonderful if everything could go back to how it used to be, if only she could get along with her friends again. When he heard her mention friends, he felt worried. He thought she was talking about people who hadn't helped her, even in the situation. Shiori called him. She smiled and said thank you. Hearing this surprised him. He was confused and said that, under normal circumstances, her homeroom teacher would be the one to handle this matter. She told him that she could no longer trust Aizawa and that she had run into him by chance on her way back from a field trip. Hearing this only confused Manaka further. Shiori told Manaka that's what Aizawa had said. She went on to say that it was strange, as she seemed to run into him frequently. This made Manaka think of the time Aizawa was messing with Shiori's phone, and he thought it was impossible. Manaka asked Shiori if she could show him her phone for a moment. They sat together. He asked her if there were any apps she couldn't remember installing. When she looked at it, she said there was nothing special about it. But suddenly she noticed a GPS tracking app. She asked in a panic what app it was, and she knew nothing about it. Manaka asked her to recall what he had said before, that he had seen Aizawa playing with her phone. It's possible he installed that app and has been tracking her all this time. Upon hearing this, Shiori was terrified. She said she didn't understand and asked why he did it. What kind of person is Aizawa, ultimately? Manaka said that it's possible if you ask someone who was once Aizawa's student at Kayama High School, they might be able to find out some information about him. It could be related to bullying. Shiori told him that the person was probably in high school now, and that they were strangers to her, so it would be difficult to talk to them. But Manaka stopped her and said that he had actually thought about it already. Aizawa was at home, thinking about having told Shiori that he would stand by her side. He wondered if he had really said that. Later, he was watching a replay of the girls throwing trash into Shiori's bag, laughing and saying that they were done throwing trash and couldn't wait to see Shiori's reaction. The sounds of all the times Shiori was bullied echoed in his mind, while Aizawa told himself that, after all, he was the one who had pushed her into hell. Next, someone says, "Thank you for today," and the other person replies, "Have a safe journey home." We see a student walk out of the store. Then suddenly, someone called the student over. It was Shiori and Manaka. Manaka asked the student if he could talk to him for a bit. Shiori asked her classmate Manaka about this. Manaka replied that it was true, and that when he was researching Aizawa, he had asked his brother about this. He asked his brother if any of his classmates had ever attended Kayama Junior High School, where Aizawa used to work. The school his brother attended wasn't far from that high school, so he thought he might try asking. Manaka went on to say that after some time, his brother told him that there was a student who knew what had happened to the victim. Shiori hesitated before asking where that person was now. Manaka replied that he didn't attend high school but worked on weekends at a building materials store in his hometown. And from what he heard, everyone knew he worked there now through rumors. Hearing that, Shiori became worried. Manika told her that he understood Shiori's feelings, and that trying to talk about the victim's past frankly wasn't a good idea. If they talked to him, they might find out more information about Aizawa. Manika said they should try to meet him, because this person is a victim of bullying. Now, the victim is walking past them. He asked about the bullying incident that happened a year ago, and Manika replied that he understood the question might be rude, but there was something they needed to know. Negishi walked past and said there was nothing to say. Seeing him go by, Shiori called him back and said she was being bullied. Shiori tried to stop him. Shiori admitted that she was being bullied. Manaka tried to stop her, but Shiori continued and said that they were asking Negishi about something he probably didn't want to remember. Therefore, she needed to at least let him know about her situation. Negishi replied and asked, "So what if you're being bullied?" And he didn't think that concerned him at all. Shiori agreed with Negishi and said that they had something in common. She explained that her homeroom teacher was Aizawa. Hearing the name Aizawa, Negishi was startled and turned around to ask her, with a frightened expression, if it was really Aizawa. Shiori confirmed this and went on to explain that they both wanted to ask about Aizawa. Negishi didn't know what to say after that. Manaka continued, recounting that the day before, they had discovered a suspicious GPS tracking app on Shiori's phone, and it appeared that Aizawa was the one who had installed it. Maneka also stated that although Aizawa was Shiori's homeroom teacher, he didn't help her. Instead, he helped the bullies, not the victims. After hearing this, Negishi recalled Aizawa's face. Shiori asked him about Aizawa when he was his homeroom teacher, and if there was anything about him he could share. All of this brought back Negishi's memories of being bullied and standing on top of the building. Negishi recalled the moment Aizawa looked at him, holding his notebook, and said that everyone would forget about him soon. Suddenly, Shiori called Negishi's name, snapping him out of those memories. She said she understood that asking about this might be difficult, but she really wanted to know about it because she is currently in the same situation as he was in the past. Hearing Shiori say that, Negishi was surprised and asked her, "You and I, are we in the same situation?" He approached her, trembling with fear, and he yelled, telling her not to joke with him, saying she knew nothing about him. He declared that there was nothing more to say and left. Shiori and Manaka were both shocked by Negishi's behavior. He went on to say that he had decided not to think about the past anymore, especially regarding Aizawa, and he was terrified. Seeing his fear, Shiori felt worried. She apologized, admitting that she regretted arriving so suddenly without considering his feelings, and for asking such an insensitive question. Negishi suddenly spoke up, saying that he was living a life without looking back at the past. He has a job and is trying to contribute to society. Although it's difficult, he's doing his best. Suddenly, Negishi approached Shiori with a frightened expression and said that he hoped those bullies were having a bad time. Hearing this made Shiori feel confused. She recalled what Manaka had told her about the victim earlier. She apologized to Negishi for what had happened today and promised not to bother him again, then left. Negishi stood there, watching anxiously as they walked away. At school, the principal was telling the teachers that he was sure the third-grade teachers were aware of the situation, but that parent-teacher meetings would begin tomorrow. He went on to say that these students would be taking exams, so he was sure there would be anxious parents coming to the school and asked the teachers to help them address those anxieties appropriately. After glancing at the teachers, he said there was nothing more to discuss and intended to end the meeting. However, Yazaki suddenly stood up, and Yazaki asked the principal if he could say a few words. Yazaki's decision to stand up surprised the principal. Yazaki said she was in charge of a different class, and that, frankly, it was a difficult thing to say. But Shiori, who is in grades 3 to 5, is currently being bullied. Hearing the word bullying, all the teachers were shocked. Everyone asked Yazaki to wait a moment and asked Aizawa if what she said was true. Aizawa looked them straight in the eye and replied that nothing was wrong. One person asked if she was referring to the incident on the recent field trip, while another replied that they thought it was just the students joking around. Aizawa turned to Kaneda and asked if he was right and Kaneda agreed. Kaneda said that the students had admitted they were making noise and apologized for it. He went on to say that he thought the incident had been resolved. Yazaki was surprised to see everyone siding with Aizawa. She shouted and asked everyone to stop, saying that even before the incident happened, she'd noticed signs of it. And they couldn't let it continue any longer. However, suddenly Aizawa called her and said that she was getting too emotional. He looked at her and asked if she had any concrete evidence given her having gone so far. Hearing him say that, Yazaki felt embarrassed because she had no evidence. Yazaki was furious and yelled at Aizawa, saying that he really had the audacity to make such a request of her, and that even now Shiori might be being bullied. But suddenly, the principal told her to calm down. He told everyone that this was a sensitive time for the students, so they were undoubtedly facing a lot. Regarding this incident, he was certain that Yazaki was overthinking things. The principal smiled and asked her if the students were just joking around and not actually bullying. He went on to say that from what he had seen, Shiori seemed to be getting along very well with her classmates. Hearing this stunned Yazaki, suddenly Aizawa called her, and Aizawa asked her, shouldn't she be more worried about the students in her class than the students outside of her class? He went on to say that in her class, there were students who frequently moved around during class or stood out because of their bad behavior. Hearing this, another teacher chimed in, agreeing that there were indeed many students in her class with poor attitudes, while another added further comments. Hearing all of this shocked Yazaki, and she sat down in silence. Suddenly, Aizawa called Yazaki and told her that if she continued like this, he smirked and said she was playing house. Hearing this, Yazaki became angry, but she tried to control herself and sat silently without saying anything. Now, someone looked at the phone in surprise and said it was the latest model. This person was Himekawa, telling Nagumo that the phone was beautiful and asking if it was expensive. Nagumo replied that no, saying she had received a discount from someone she knew. But then she suddenly realized something. We see Manaka and Shiori talking to each other. Manaka tells Shiori that they ultimately couldn't find anything about Aizawa. Shiori agreed and seemed worried, saying that Negishi's attitude changed noticeably when Aizawa was mentioned. Manaka replied, saying that it seemed Aizawa was involved in something. Shiori said that Aizawa had also ignored Negishi when he was being bullied. Suddenly, Nagumo called them. Himekawa looked annoyed while Nagumo grinned widely and told them that they were still as close as ever. Seeing them surprised Shiori, Himekawa approached and told Manaka that it was thanks to Shiori that Nagumo had to buy a new phone. She approached Shiori, her face full of anger, and asked her if she intended to pay for it. Shiori remained silent. Manaka then spoke up and told Nagumo and Himekawa to stop. Manaka asked them if they felt ashamed for bullying her like elementary school students. Hearing this, Himekawa was confused and told them to wait, saying that they weren't bullying Shiori and that Shiori was trying to come between them. Manaka responded, saying that if there was anything between her and them, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. He went on to say that she was really annoying. After saying that, Shiori and Manaka left. Leaving Himekawa standing there in shock, Nagumo watched them leave and saw Shiori smile. Seeing her smile made Nagumo think that she hated her, and that she was genuinely smiling. She punched the wall next to her, angrily saying that she had hated Shiori ever since they were in the basketball club. At that moment, at the bank where Suzuki worked, someone slipped in a piece of paper with Suzuki's name on it and said it was an unofficial notice. His superiors said he would be transferred to the main branch and would be a manager in sales department number 1. Looking at the paper, Suzuki thought to himself, "Here it is," and a smile spread across his face. He continued to think that the main branch and the number 1 sales office, this was the promotion he had been hoping for. He thought that if things continued to go well, he could become a CEO. Or he might even become the company's CEO. While he was daydreaming about all of this, his superiors suddenly called him. And his superiors said that the reason he sent him to the most elite branch was because of his outstanding achievements as assistant branch manager, and that this promotion was only a matter of time. Suddenly, the superior added something surprising Suzuki. He went on to tell Suzuki that sometimes, at times like these, it's easy to make mistakes, and the official announcement will be made after a month. So, if anything happens during that time, your position will be reviewed. He went on to emphasize that Suzuki needed to be cautious, especially in his relationships with women. Hearing this, Suzuki felt worried and remembered Yazaki. The boss laughed and said there was no need to worry about it because he was talking about him. Hearing this, Suzuki laughed and said that he was completely devoted to his wife. While thinking that he needed to deal with Yazaki immediately, he sat at his desk and thought that he didn't know why, but lately Yazaki had become crazy, and he needs to eliminate anything suspicious between them. He thought that first, he had to delete all the records on their phones. He texted Yazaki, saying that he needed to talk to her about something important. He thought he would make her delete those notes at all costs. He smiled and thought that as long as there was no evidence, he could get rid of her as a stalker. And everything she says is just her own illusion. As for him, he is the one who will be trusted. Suzuki went out to work, and he thought he had the support of both his superiors and subordinates, and he even had a trustworthy relationship with his daughter. He had no room for any doubt. He got into the taxi and thought that, above all, he was good at living life with a smug smile on his face. Yazaki was looking at a taxi while talking on the phone. That's the taxi Suzuki is sitting in, and she's looking at him. Yazaki is talking to her mother. Yazaki's mother asked her if she was okay with her job, and she replied that the job was really stressful, and there were a lot of unethical people in the workplace. She smiled and said she was thinking about quitting her job soon. Her mother was surprised to hear that. Yazaki then went on to tell her mother that she was thinking about getting married, with a big smile on her face. At this time, at school, Shiori is sitting with her mother. Her mother told her to remember to thank her homeroom teacher again. Hearing this, Shiori asked in surprise, "Thank you, teacher." Her mother explained that the teacher had returned her phone when she left it at school. Shiori got angry and said that the teacher didn't need to do that. Her mother was surprised, and before she could ask again, the door suddenly opened. Aizawa appeared, smiled, and asked Shiori to come into the room. This made Shiori look at him suspiciously. She wondered to herself, what exactly is this teacher trying to do? The scene shifts to Negishi, who is standing in front of the school gate as the parent-teacher meeting begins. Negishi grabbed his shoulder and looked at the school with a serious expression. Shiori sat there, looking worried. Her mother thanked Aizawa for the previous day for coming all the way to their house because of their daughter. Aizawa smiled and said that it was his duty as her homeroom teacher. Hearing this, Shiori thought to herself that it was a shameless lie. Aizawa continued his conversation with her mother about Shiori's first school choice. While they were talking, Shiori thought that the real reason he gave her the phone was to install a tracking app on it. She didn't understand why he was monitoring her, and there was no evidence to suggest he was the one who had installed it. While she was thinking about this, someone suddenly called her name. It was her mother, asking her if she was listening. Her mother became angry and shouted, saying that they were talking about her future right now. Her mother went on to say that her teacher was considering options for her in her best interest, but Aizawa intervened and told her mother there was no need to worry, and that she didn't need to be so concerned. Her mother sighed and said that she needed to learn to behave properly. Shiori's mother mentioned that something had happened to Yumi recently. Hearing this, Aizawa questioned her about it. A little while later, Shiori and her mother returned, after someone mentioned that it had been a long time. Shiori's mother recognized Yumi and her mother. Shiori's mother greeted them and asked how they were doing, and Yumi replied that she was fine. While the mothers were chatting, Yumi didn't look at Shiori at all. Suddenly, Yumi's mother spoke up and said that Yumi had been playing with Shiori since elementary school, and they were still best friends, right? Yumi replied, "Yes, she's my best friend." Hearing Yumi say that shocked Shiori. She glared at Yumi angrily and then walked away. Shiori's actions left Yumi and her mother stunned. Shiori's mother apologized for her daughter's actions, but Yumi's mother said it was okay and she shouldn't worry. Seeing Shiori's reaction angered Yumi. She thought she should have understood Shiori's feelings better. Now, in the present moment, Shiori's mother sighed. She felt tired and said that Shiori had been listless at home lately, then asked if she'd been acting strangely recently. Shiori's mother asked Aizawa if Shiori was doing well in school. Aizawa smiled and replied that, from what he could see, she seemed to be doing well in her studies lately. She's just going through puberty, so she'll definitely have a lot to worry about, especially her relationships with friends. He went on to say that he himself had a lot of difficulties when he was a student, laughing as he spoke. This statement surprised Shiori, Aizawa continued, saying that Shiori also had other teachers she could rely on, and he asked if she often went to see her mother for advice. Shiori's mother was surprised to hear this. Aizawa continued, saying that she also had a basketball club mentor, Yazaki. Shiori's mother was extremely shocked when she heard the name Yazaki. Aizawa went on to say that it seemed Shiori had been in the basketball club, and that she had certainly built a trustworthy relationship with Yazaki during that time. Upon hearing all this, Shiori's mother clenched her fists in anger. The mother suddenly became serious and asked Shiori if she was still on good terms with Yazaki. Even after she left the basketball club, Shiori replied, saying she wasn't sure either. But Yazaki was the teacher she trusted most at school. The mother looked at Shiori with a worried and confused expression. Shiori continued, saying that Yazaki was a good and very kind person, and that if she needed advice, she would go to Yazaki. Suddenly, the mother slammed her hand on the table in anger. Seeing her mother's reaction, Shiori was shocked. She called out to her mother in confusion, but her mother replied, "A good person?" She went on to explain how things started from the moment they met that woman, but Aizawa interrupted her and asked if anything had happened to Yazaki. After hearing Aizawa's question, the mother regained her composure and apologized. She said she had just remembered she had something to do and would excuse herself to leave. Shiori was surprised and asked her mother to wait. As Shiori tried to leave the classroom, Aizawa said, "I wonder what just happened." He asked Shiori if they could continue the interview, as they still had time. Shiori began to tremble with anger and told him that she knew he had no intention of helping her. She suddenly screamed and said that he had installed a tracking app on her phone, monitoring her without her knowledge, and then asked him what it was. She went on to ask him if he had done similar things to Negishi at their old school. Upon hearing Shiori mention Negishi, Aizawa was shocked and reacted unusually. Seeing Aizawa's reaction, Shiori smiled and said that even he could lose his composure. She said she was going to leave and walked out of the classroom. Then, Shiori followed her mother, while her mother was thinking that Yazaki was trying to ruin their family, and even attempting to take her daughter away. Suddenly, they heard someone calling, and when they turned around, they saw it was Yazaki. Yazaki asked Shiori's mother if she was her mother. Yazaki said it had been a long time since they last met. Shiori's mother was surprised to see Yazaki there. Yazaki then asked if the parent interviews were over and added that her own interviews were also nearing completion. Then, Yazaki recognized Shiori and approached her. Yazaki held Shiori's hand and asked if she was okay. This left Shiori feeling confused. Yazaki went on to say that she had so much she wanted to tell Shiori the day before, and that those things had been haunting her ever since. This surprised Shiori's mother even more. Shiori turned around and saw her mother with an expressionless face. Her mother approached and asked if she could go home early. Shiori's mother smiled at her and said that she had something to discuss with Yazaki. Shiori was very surprised to hear this, but this made Yazaki happy. Mother and Yazaki walked away together while Shiori stayed behind. I tried to call them, but it was too late. Shiori stood there, wondering what her mother was doing and whether she had any connection to Yazaki. Suddenly, Shiori heard an apology, and the other person said that if they didn't have an appointment with Aizawa, they couldn't meet him. She turned around and was astonished to see it was Negishi. She couldn't believe her eyes and wondered if Negishi had come to see Aizawa. Although he said he didn't want to remember anything about when they met, she noticed Negishi trembling as he clutched the strap of his bag, clearly frightened. This made Shiori wonder if he had ulterior motives and if he was still angry with Aizawa. Suddenly, Negishi noticed Shiori and started to turn away. When Shiori tried to stop him, she asked him what he intended to do if he found Aizawa. Negishi paused and replied curtly, "Who knows?" which silenced Shiori. Later, Outside Shiori's house, Suzuki was trying to make a phone call to someone. He angrily shouted, "That woman is really playing games with me!" He wondered why she wasn't answering the phone. In his anger, he thought she hadn't shown up at their agreed-upon location and wondered what was going on. As he entered the house, he muttered to himself that everything was really frustrating him. But then he stopped abruptly. He noticed the lights in the house were off and wondered if no one was home. Upon entering the house, Suzuki assumed Shiori was probably at her extra classes, and he wondered if his wife had fallen asleep yet. He went into the kitchen, drank some water, and then slammed the glass down on the table in anger. He thought he would meet Yazaki tomorrow, and that she would surely delete their messages. As he left the kitchen, he wondered if there was any unexpected meeting. He thought his wife had never canceled a meeting at the last minute. But suddenly he noticed something. He found his wife in the bathtub full of water, seemingly having tried to end her own life. The sight terrified and shocked Suzuki. He called out to her, panicking and frantically pulling her out, asking what she was doing and begging her to try to survive. She called his name, her eyes filled with tears and pain, saying that she had always believed in him. Hearing that, Suzuki began to suspect his wife. She began to lose consciousness. Seeing this, Suzuki stepped back, his face filled with bewilderment. Suzuki wondered why this was happening. He thought he had to call emergency services immediately, and he did. He recounted the situation to them and thought to himself, "She can't die now, especially with my promotion still pending." While he was on the phone, Shiori stood there, looking in his direction. Shiori asked Suzuki if anything had happened to her mother. Seeing Shiori frightened him, Suzuki quickly told her not to go into the bathroom and explained her mother's condition. Upon hearing this, Shiori was shocked and immediately ran towards the bathroom. Suzuki tried to stop her, but it was too late. When Shiori saw her mother in that state, she screamed in panic. That scream frightened and panicked Suzuki. Shiori started crying and asked why her mother did that. Meanwhile, Suzuki held her back from behind. He called emergency services, asked when they would arrive, said that if they didn't arrive in time, it would be too late, and asked them to guide him on what to do. While Suzuki tried to take care of his wife, Shiori said that she shouldn't leave her mother alone with Yazaki. Hearing this, Suzuki was shocked and asked about Yazaki. Shiori replied that it seemed her mother hated Yazaki for some reason, but she didn't know exactly why. Shiori continued to ask why this was happening. Suddenly, Suzuki realized that today's parent-teacher meeting was the reason. And Yazaki probably told his wife everything. Eventually, Suzuki realized that the root cause of it all was his infidelity. With tears welling up in her eyes, Shiori asked Suzuki if he knew anything about this. He called Shiori's name slowly, his face showing confusion and shock. Then he said he didn't know anything. He thought to himself that even if he were found out, he would never let his daughter know the truth. At that moment, an ambulance was passing by, and a person was standing on the roof of a building. That person was Aizawa on the phone, apologizing to someone for the loud ambulance siren. Aizawa said he was surprised that they had come to his school today. Someone else said something, but Aizawa interrupted and said that he knew, that there were many things he wanted to ask. Finally, Aizawa was talking to Negishi, and he said, "Let's talk for a bit, Negishi."